And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, him.
Attention, roll call.
That's right. Good morning, everybody. Starting 2025, right? Happy New Year to everybody. Here we are, 8:05 Eastern Time. For me, it's 5:05 on the West Coast. It's dark, bright, and early. I usually don't pay too much time to JuJu, but I think we should start out with JuJu's comment because it segues right into a topic here. Excuse me. According to JuJu, we know it's going to be a tough day for John, Eric, and Sal based on this news. We told you Chell isn't going anywhere. I love when he says we. Yeah, because they got a whole team on this podcast here. We told you Chell isn't going anywhere, but chose to believe your source's beautiful day. Well, it's not a tough day for John, myself, and Sal. It's a sad day for the entire police department and the city because you just replaced the appearance of impropriety, corruption, with a worse monster than we had before. He said it himself numerous times, and we have the evidence to show in case they want to try to deflect from it. But John Chell's mentor is Jeffrey Maddrey. We just replaced a monster with the worst monster. John, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are JuJu's on this thing at 03:25 in the morning. This comment comes out. Screw John Chell. John Chell will not be there long. Mark my words. I don't even think Eric Adams is long for his seat any further. And I think we really got to get into, it was absolutely horrendous appointment. It showed that Jessica Tish is a complete puppet. The whole first part of her administration, where it appeared she could be that Teddy Roosevelt figure, just got completely tarnished. She let Eric Adams dirty her up, and that I'm not sad about it at all. I texted Eric when it happened. I said, you know what? I got to be honest. I'm happy. This is great. This is just more content. This is more stuff we're gonna have to do. This is more stuff we're gonna have to put out. This is more insanity. This is Jeffrey Maddrey, whatever was happening in his office, times 20, because Jeffrey Maddrey might have had that ego, but not in the public. John Chell cannot hide his ego. And it shows that, again, our internal affairs complaint is going to be completely tainted because John Chell is the main player in our internal affairs complaint, right? So so now he's in charge of the department. I expect the same exact functioning from Internal Affairs Bureau, regardless of the fact that Thompson's in there or if they redo Group 1. The whole thing's a joke because it's against him and his boys. He's the main player. Besides Ed Caban and Kaz Daughtry, he's the other main player. Jeffrey Maddrey.
Well, I just said it before offline. Excuse me. On behalf of Jessica Tish and the entire police department, they basically just said F you to myself and John. Not the rank and file. We're talking about the upper echelon. This apparent and supposed virtue signaling to clean slate of Group 1 from Internal Affairs with the appearance of impropriety and the fact that Internal Affairs is completely exposed, compromised, infected by this corruption that's going on at the top. And John and I have proved that the Internal Affairs protects the upper echelon while they investigate the rank and file to deflect from any impropriety from the upper echelon. Right here is just more indication and just complete evidence that it's basically an FU to myself and John. Our entire investigation was Stonewall for an entire year. Here we are. Our complaint was January last year, so we're now a year into it. 1 year later, completely stonewalled. We were told it would be reinvestigated. They had to be removed. And not only did they get removed, but they got replaced while John Chell was promoted to Chief of Department, and he's at the center of this complaint. His underlings are at the center of this complaint. So clearly it's not going anywhere. So if anything, things have gotten worse. They haven't gotten better. So on the onset of Jessica Tish's appointment, I said that Jessica Tish would, that she would move some pieces around. She's supported by the 43rd richest family in the entire country. And I said to myself, is she going to be that white horse to clean the department? Or is it just cleaning itself? Some of these scandals have rocked publicly, and it's cleaning itself. And is she just a patsy for Eric Adams? And right now, it appears she's just a patsy for Eric Adams.
Yeah, so screw John Chell. We'll get into that later. Breaking news this morning. Jeffrey Maddrey was suspended. But why was Jeffrey Maddrey suspended? He wasn't suspended on the onset of the allegation. The person that considers Jeffrey Maddrey his friend and mentor, from his own words, John Chell, was promoted. Maddrey just got to retire. No one said anything. Abruptly resign his post. The Quisha Epps was suspended. Paul Sarceno, I believe the most of the time was the executive officer in the Chief of Department's office, and then he winded up becoming the commanding officer of the Chief of Department's office, which I'm not sure, but there's also another guy in there, Teddy Fedorov, who was also there. Teddy wasn't suspended, but Paul was modified. Jeff wasn't suspended. And now this morning, all of a sudden, Maddrey's suspended. It's like, oh, all right. Now, is it taking Jessica Tish a week to catch up to that? He should have been immediately suspended upon the allegations coming out. Everything's all over the place. And then it comes out, oh, we know why he was suspended, right? Oh, because the feds raided his home this morning. So, again, it was zero choice. She had zero choice other than to suspend Jeffrey Maddrey. It wasn't done. It wasn't at her direction. There was zero political choice at this point. This was, Eric, we have no choice anymore. We have to do this. We're going to destroy both of our careers politically. Your career's already destroyed politically. You're going to destroy my future career. We have no choice. That's in my opinion, why I think Jeffrey Maddrey's now suspended. Would you disagree with that? I mean, why wasn't Caban suspended? Why wasn't Shell suspended? Why wasn't Daughtry suspended? Why wasn't Tanya Kinsella suspended? This isn't the first round of the feds raiding people, unlike what John Chell said on Newsmax. You know, those weren't raids. That was just a 30, 40 FBI agents showed up at my house in the early morning. Nobody in this department got raided. They just took all of our electronics. That was it. It was just an inquiry. Oh, okay.
Clearly, there are no standards on this job. We talk about it all the time on this podcast. Numerous episodes do we say there's absolutely no standards, there's no metric of measure when it comes to the NYPD. Absolutely. I mean, you can see it right here. Here's the evidence. Paul Saraceno, Deputy Chief, who works in the Chief of Department's office, it's rumored to believe that he is physically, he's the one that actually signed the slips for Lieutenant Epps.
Which I don't believe, by the way.
No, which I was just going to say, which I'm very curious to actually see, if that's true. But does it even matter? No. In my opinion, anyone that's in that office was aware Lieutenant Epps was doing an excessive amount of overtime, and based on those numbers, it was impossible that she was actually there, present for all these appearances. So he's accountable and liable. But from what I hear, apparently he was the executive officer at the time, and Fedorov was the commanding officer, which means he would be accountable and liable as well. And so would Jeffrey Maddrey. And yet, when Jeffrey Maddrey, let's look back when he had that press conference with his attorney in front and center stage to the entire world, he threw and drove the bus right over the entire office, anyone that was directly involved in signing those overtime slips, and tried to deflect any responsibility to himself. Complete coward. Those are your leaders of the NYPD. Complete coward. How can we expect them to support the cops when they won't support themselves, when they won't support the people that are in bed with them? Because they're cowards and they'll throw anyone under the bus to save their own asses. Shout out to 516 Diecast, $4.99 coffee and donuts. Wishing my friends for New Year health, strength, and safety for. By the way, still waiting on my retired 2025 PBA cards. Yeah, good luck, especially if you're a friend that listens to this podcast. They probably won't even mail it to you. But looking at this suspension, you and I just talked about this offline, and I question, was Jeffrey Maddrey actually suspended because of this investigation and the scandal that has rocked the public with Lieutenant Epps, with former Lieutenant Epps? Was he actually suspended? Was this FBI probe connected? Is there a nexus between this FBI probe and Lieutenant Epps, or is this have something to do with Caban or something else. I mean, listen, there's so many aspects and so many different appearances of potential corruption that we can't even direct it and say it's one particular thing. There's so many levels going on. This is just one spoke on the wheel. So clearly, Tish is not that white horse. If anything, this is the worst decision she made in her life, to take the appointment as police commissioner if she's going to be a patsy for Eric Adams, because this is going to tarnish her good name, and this is going to tarnish her family's name as the 43rd richest family in the entire country.
So I agree with JuJu. It's a sad day for the department. It's not really a sad day for us. I mean, we're gonna rise to the top of media with all this corruption scandal, especially the fact that we've been had our finger on the pulse of it the entire time. So it's not a bad thing for us. It's a bad thing for New York City. It's a bad thing for the NYPD. I mean, financially, publicly, if we were chasing clout, I mean, this is great for the podcast. So JuJu doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, but I think you're right. I think now when we see all these people, when I see all these leftists in city council, I see all these Marxists, these anti-police state senators and state assemblymen, I'm talking about Carl Hasty. I'm talking about Congress people like Richie Torres, who now wants to pretend like he's MAGA. All the people that wanted to defund us, the Justin Brannons of the world, even the soft, phony, fake Joe Borellis of the world. When I see all these people say there's no standards in NYPD discipline, how could you absolutely argue that? I can't. Like this. What happened to the disciplinary matrix? What happened to standards in practice and investigation? What happened to standards when you understand people? I mean, just look at this. Look at this. You got one guy enthralled in the same. They're all involved in the same investigation. The whole upper echelon. They're all involved in it. Some of them have a little bit more allegations. Some of them have a little less. But the guy that's directly in the middle of all of it, John Chell, gets promoted. The guy who now was supposedly allowing a corruption, extortion, racketeering ring to go on, and Jeffrey Maddrey and John Chell and Kaz Daughtry and Tommy Kinsella all turned a blind eye to it. He just gets to retire and walk off into the sunset. He's just going to step down. Eddie just wanted to pursue other businesses. He just gets to step down. Tanya Kinsella stays in place. Kaz Daughtry stays in place. Jeffrey Maddrey wasn't suspended up until now. Now the FBI raided his home. But why is he suspended? Because the FBI raided Ed Caban's home. He wasn't suspended. The FBI raided a lot of other people's homes in the NYPD, and they weren't suspended. The FBI took a lot of other people's phones, and they weren't suspended. And then you go over to a guy like Paul Sarcino, and he's modified. And it's like, wait. So he has the same allegations as Jeffrey Maddrey, except he wasn't doing the dirty in the office. He was just a patsy, the fall guy. He was just a fall guy, Paul, because guess what happens when you lay down with dogs? You get fleas. Probably send a late Christmas present to the FBI for raiding Jeffrey Maddrey's home, because they threw you right under the bus, brother. And not only did they throw you under the bus, I'm not going to go into what I got sent over and over again from zero user accounts that was sending me all of this information on you that we never put out, because we're like, you know what? Can't verify any of this. None of this stuff even matters. And why are we getting all this information about Paul Sarcino the day that LaQuisha Epps is the whole scandal breaks out that she's the top overtime earner? It looked like a complete setup to me from your buddies who you were working with. It looked like a complete setup that they were trying to muddy the waters up on you and deflect from themselves, and trying to throw everyone, including the entire media, off the trail of who actually is. But we're not dumb enough to do that, because we know that leadership is ultimately important. So while we don't say you're not innocent in all of this, you were complicit in all of this, the main player, obviously, was everyone that held the title of police commissioner, everyone that held chief of department, chief of patrol, deputy commissioner of operations, first step, and you were just a lackey. You were a patsy. So Paul Sorcino gets modified, but then when you get to the lieutenant, she gets suspended. So it's like, wait a minute, where's the standard? What standard is there in the NYPD? There's none. There's absolutely none. We're just winging it as we go. This whole thing exposed Tish for how inept and incompetent she is herself. Tish, I was a big supporter. I was probably the biggest supporter in the entire law enforcement community. From the onset, I said, I love the appointment. I gave my honest opinion about why I loved it. You're proving yourself to be a patsy to Eric Adams. And this man is highly incompetent, highly incompetent. And you're listening to what he has to say. And I get that Bill Bratton's in the background, but you have to understand about one thing about Bill Bratton. It's the same thing about Dermot Shea. I think both of those men, when you look at public safety, are geniuses. I think that I would love to pick their brains on a million different topics, but they're both beholden to other men. They're puppets. So all their genius is good for absolutely nothing, because they'll allow a politician like a puppet to stick their hand directly up their rectum and use their mouth for them. So you have to understand, you can't take what they're telling you in account. But when it comes to politically, these are spineless, cowardly people that are beholden to politicians because of money. You shouldn't be that.
And it appears the cycle doesn't stop right there, because with this appointment of Jessica Tish, it appears she also has a hand puppet also up her rectum. Also, at this point, she appears to be a patsy for Eric Adams. I was hoping, and John, you were hoping also, that coming from the 43rd richest family, being a billionaire heiress, being an outsider from the police department, as far as being an actual police officer, she worked for the police department. She understands city government. She understands state government, that she might have more of a backbone, and there may be more pushback with Eric Adams. But it's apparent with her appointment, she's working under the thumb of Eric Adams. And this is going to tarnish her good name. If she ever had those aspirations, which there was every indication she had aspirations to become mayor one day and be that white horse and that Teddy Roosevelt cleaning house. And I said to myself, is she cleaning house? Or right now it just gives the appearance that it's cleaning itself, because some of these scandals were so sexy, created so much drama, that they rocked the public. They rocked, had all eyes on it. So at this point, I think Logic's finest. Great comment. I agree with you. He says, Eric, none of this matters. Jessica Tish was always a rubber stamp. Absolutely. We were hoping, right? Because this podcast is not hatred, and it's not bitter towards the police department. It's because we love the police department. We love the profession. We love the law enforcement profession, not just in New York City, but nationwide and worldwide. It's an important profession. It's a noble profession. But with this administration, so egregious, it destroyed the appearance of it. I traveled throughout the entire country, and when I tell people I'm retired from the NYPD, like, wow, what is going on in that city? Not what you would hear one time, like, wow, the NYPD, were people impressed? There is a different notion now and a different ideology when it comes to that. There's absolutely no standard, John. When we talk about, in one office where we have small unit leadership breakdown, I learned in the Marine Corps, it's very important, small unit leadership breakdown. And what that means is that every leader at every level should take ownership and responsibility. So the buck doesn't stop with Paul Saraceno. Paul Saraceno should have been suspended. Fedorov should have been suspended. And so should Jeffrey Maddrey. That's a standard. That's a level playing field. Why is Saraceno modified? Jeffrey Maddrey is suspended weeks later. The bottom line is, in order to have effective leadership when it comes to discipline is supposed to be swift and immediate and then move on from there. But it wasn't. This was lagging on, which gives another appearance of low maintained integrity. But that's what's going on right now, because Jessica Tish is not running the police department. Clearly, it's still Eric Adams. So at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if eventually we'll get another police commissioner, because this is the path and this is the cycle that we see. Tom, shout out to you. Coffee and donuts, $1.99. Adams gets no pardon after that terrorist attacks. It's very possible. That's a great point. Definitely highlighting that. It's insane what's going on in this country. Absolutely. John, absolutely no standard. I'm disappointed in Jessica Tish, but it's no surprise. I think the Corey Pegues interview was a major reflection on that, really solidified it. And then this suspension days later, or I think it's even over a week now, to me, just completely validates it.
Yeah, it was again. It was only done because it had to be done. The FBI just raided his home. So this is what Tish had to say about it. She put this out about 8 minutes before this podcast started. At my direction, the Internal Affairs Bureau of the New York City Police Department is working with law enforcement authorities to investigate allegations against former Chief of Department Jeffrey Maddrey. Maddrey was suspended from the department this morning as law enforcement agents executed search warrants at several locations, including his residence. Any further inquiries about this matter should be directed to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. Jessica S. Tish, Police Commissioner. So, I mean, you got to look at this, people. You got to look at this from another perspective, right? Where, again, we just placed a new chief of internal affairs. But yet again, it's not internal affairs that's fighting corruption in the New York City Police Department or in New York City. Who's fighting corruption? It's the feds. So, and it leads to the question, how far and how deep is the Internal Affairs Bureau involved in covering up these crimes? And I'm going to tell you right now, very. And the way that things are set up right now, it looks like we just played musical chairs, but the game stays the same. The direction of how these corruption complaints and all of these investigations that got smeared, they're all the same way. The whole thing is still in place to allow this corruption to prosper. If you're not going to change how complaints get intake, how they get investigated, and put in fail-proof measures and ways that these allegations can't just slip through the cracks and are properly investigated, you did nothing. You played musical chairs. You're playing the game, the Eric Adams game. It's perception versus reality. The perception is crime's down. The reality is you had 11 people shot in Queens last night. The perception is crime was down last year. The reality is we know it wasn't. We know that crime was not down last year. We know that in the days and weeks as these small random audits come out, because they'll take a sampling, 20 complaint reports, whatever they look at from each command. Just by doing that small random sampling, they're going to find so many complaints that should have been classified as felonies that, again, Eric Adams, for the third year in a row, will lose crime and crime will have risen. We all know that. But the perception is crime's down, subways are safe. And this is just more of that.
I think the musical chairs that we see what's going on with internal affairs in the upper echelon right now is a byproduct of the scandal that rocked publicly because of Lieutenant Epps. If it wasn't for Lieutenant Epps coming forward, this would have been something else that would have been completely swept on the rug. Jeffrey Maddrey would have made his escape. It would have been washed away. Chief Iglesias would have still been the head of internal affairs, and nothing would change. And right now, all we see is virtual signaling. It's just some pieces being moved around, but the system still remains the same. And it's a broken system in the police department right now. And ironically, we replaced a monster. Jeffrey Maddrey is a monster, no doubt about it. He created these monsters, Tariq Shepard, Kaz Daughtry, John Chell. But they always say it's a long gnomon that goes on. The pupil is better than the teacher. But in this case, since Jeffrey Maddrey is the mentor for John Chell, the pupil is going to be worse than the teacher. And that's John Chell. And John Chell is at the center of these allegations. And not just by you, John, and not just by me, not just by our complaint. John Chell has publicly had pissing matches with social media. He's tried to control the narrative on social media. He has had pissing matches with journalists. He's had pissing matches with us, encrypted messages, an investigation that entails John Chell being a mob-type boss. And in addition to that, he also has allegations from Dana Rachel on a smear campaign because of her rape allegations. And yet, with these allegations, with the appearance of impropriety, with all the stuff going on right now, he's appointed as the chief of department. And again, I think Cord Peace, I think that segment with Eric Adams was almost a little bit of the real Eric Adams, because that was his friend. He got comfortable. He was trying to say, hey, brother, and, you know, and trying to fit in, because Eric Adams likes to fit in with every, you know, who's ever in his company. That's what Eric Adams likes to do. He's a chameleon. But if you listen to that interview, a lot of the stuff that he says is really what's going on. And he says, you know, he's questioned about the appointment of Jeffrey Maddrey. You know, are you going to, and he says, are you going to be viewed by the worst day in your life, the worst mistake? And he said, people make mistakes. Now, I agree, people make mistakes. But he said, you know, how many mistakes? And when you see a pattern of mistakes, do you put that person, elevate them to a position of authority when there are allegations and a pattern of abusing their authority? So, and Eric Adams, he was smart in a sense that he said, well, I was given about 1, 2, 10 different chances. So according to Eric Adams, you could just constantly make mistakes, and it doesn't matter, and the leadership will never be accountable because you can make more than one mistake. So I think this appointment is absolutely terrible. I think that this is just a further blight on the police department. It's a further blight on internal affairs. It just validates our claims that internal affairs should be an outside source, because John Chell, who's at the center of these complaints, along with the khaki pants, who's beholden to John Chell, has basically just gotten complete immunity from John Chell as the chief of department. This is just a complete slap in the face. So here we are, moving forward, and ultimately the cycle continues. Nothing has changed. Jessica Tish is not the actual police commissioner. She's not pulling the strings. Eric Adams in charge. Epic fail, epic fail.
Yeah, so the appointment was terrible, but I thought also like the worst look I thought was modifying Paul Sarcino. I'm like, wait, so you're putting this guy you're putting this guy as the fall guy? So we were actually wrong. We thought it was going to be John Chell, but he actually skated. He actually used Jeffrey Maddrey as a trampoline. He hung on his coattails all the way until he pulled him down, and he jumped up above him and he took his spot. You know, so we were actually wrong. We had, I think we did 3 episodes titled "The Fall Guy" about the car pursuits, right? And we had John Chell's face on there, John Chell, the fall guy. And we were wrong. It was Paul Sarcino who was actually the fall guy. Came out of retirement to be the fall guy. And they, you know, and I thought that was the dirtiest move in all this. I was like, wow, so he's not sleeping with this girl. He's not in charge of that office. He's the commanding officer. But let's not play dumb here. Let's not play like we don't know how the NYPD works. Oh, Jeffrey Maddrey has no idea what's going on in his office. Yeah, okay. Jeffrey Maddrey, the chances that Jeffrey Maddrey didn't go to Paul and say, this is my girl and she's going to do as much overtime she wants and just let her do whatever she wants, it's 0. It's 0% that conversation didn't happen. There's 0%. I don't think Paul was just like, oh, yeah, let me just sign off on 87 hours a week of overtime. That's impossible to do. Yeah, let me do that. Yeah, let me do that. I've made it this far in my career to get here, but yeah, I don't see anything wrong here at all. No, the chances are 0. And again, I'm not holding him unaccountable. I'm just saying where the accountability fall in the line of it. And he's accountable as far as he's complicit. He's complicit to those orders. He's accountable as far as they're all complicit in the mandate where they were like, oh, yeah, no, Cass Daughtry doesn't have to put in an exemption, and he's good to go. And everybody else is good to go. And Tanya Kinsella, you don't have to do anything, and we're going to approve your exemption. Oh, and I have a buddy in the religious accommodation unit, so I'm good. You know, they're complicit as everybody else is complicit. But when we talk about who the problem is, the problem lies at the top. The problem is the upper echelon of the job. Does Paul Sarcino fall in the upper echelon of the job? Yeah, he does, but not a main player. Not a main player at all. It's complete insanity. Like that was like the ultimate. That was the ultimate for me. I'm like, all right, we're gonna modify this guy. We're gonna try to brush all of this off onto him. That was what internal affairs That's how they were viewing this investigation was going to go. And that's why I'm saying that I've been saying for years that internal affairs reverse engineers outcomes of investigations, meaning they already have who's guilty, and then they just have to investigate it to find out who it is. They already know the way these investigations are going to go. Same way when our allegation came in, they already knew that they were going to unsubstantiate all of our allegations, even though we gave irrefutable evidence of all of them criminally associating, of all of them misusing police resources, of all of them doing nefarious things while they were in attacks on our First Amendment speech, bullying attacks, using the weight of the police department. Federal crimes, by the way, federal crimes. But the Internal Affairs Bureau already knew the outcome of that investigation. Now they just had to investigate it in such a way to unsubstantiate all the claims. And that's exactly what's happening with this investigation until the pause button happened because the feds raid Jeffrey Maddrey's home. And then they're like, oh, we got a problem. Maybe we're going to have to investigate Jeffrey Maddrey now. Yeah, maybe Ed Thompson. Maybe you're going to have to investigate now. Maybe you're going to have to look into his criminal association ties. Maybe you're going to have to look into the fact why everyone that's still in place, including the now chief of department, was hanging out in a place that was unlicensed, where sex trafficking was going on, drug sales were happening, and we all turned a blind eye to it. Oh, and by the way, the owner of this place just happened to be friends with the police commissioner, and his partner just happened to be threatening this podcast. For what reasons? We still don't know.
There's no doubt in my mind that the appearance and that the evidence that we have at this point, and some of it which is circumstantial, leads to the fact that Jeffrey Maddrey was suspended because of an aspect that has nothing to do with Lieutenant Epps. This FBI probe, in my opinion, gives the appearance has nothing to do with Lieutenant Epps. Because if it did, it wouldn't make sense of this round robin that we see. Paul Sarasano, first of all, in my opinion, should have been suspended. There's no doubt in my mind what you just said, John. I 100% agree with you that conversation was had at some point that, hey, this is my girl. Whatever the case is, if he knew there's a relationship or not, I'll pretend and play. Let's pretend and say he had no idea. But we know, John, everybody knows. I can tell you right now, John, you know what? You and I were in the police department. Cops know everything. Everybody knows everything that's going on, but everybody pretends they don't know. Everyone knew that there's a relationship going on in that office with Epps or maybe others involved also, and that people were getting special treatment and special privileges. No doubt in my mind. There's no doubt in my mind. You're 100% right that conversation was had about him taking care of the girl. And when we say girl, Lieutenant Epps, as far as all the time, or maybe others as well, Jeffrey Maddrey has a full immense power. And this just further validates, solidifies every time we say, and I say it, I get a lot of opposition for it, that every chief is compromised. Every chief at this point is compromised because at no point did Paul Sarasano ever push back and say, no, I'm not doing it. And you know what's odd? You know what's interesting about this? And it's ironic. He put himself in a position to work for Maddrey, to work in that office. He could have retired. And yet Maddrey drove the bus.
He did retire and he came back.
Right, that's what I'm saying. He did retire, he came back, but he could have retired again. And Maddrey drove the bus right over him. That press conference was done for two reasons. One, to deflect any potential criminal allegations or indictments that may come forward for Jeffrey Maddrey. And two, to deflect any responsibility and accountability and blame it on the commanding officers in that office. This is an epic fail. Jessica Tish did not put her finger on this. Jessica Tish did not sign off on this. This just happens to be incidental. Jeffrey Maddrey's scandal was exposed because of former Lieutenant Epps. That's why Jessica Tish had to put some pressure on Chief Iglesias, because it was obvious that either Epps or Maddrey or both got a tip about her being investigated for the overtime. There's no doubt about it. Internal Affairs is completely compromised. We've been saying this for a year. We've been saying this for 2 years. We've been told we were radicals, we're insane, we're racist because we've identified and exposed the appearance from a distance. And that's why I say every chief is compromised. How do you not see what it's going on right there? There was a memo that was surfaced throughout the police department yesterday. And the memo was the new checks and balances that are going to be in place for overtime. And who was that to? It was to every chief on the job. Commanding officer this unit, commanding officer every unit. The new overtime plan And not one chief stood up and said, wait a minute, this is absolutely ridiculous. Now we have to put pressure on our personnel for a scandal that rocked at one police plaza. The abuse, the excessive overtime that has been implemented was by the upper echelon at one police plaza for administrative positions. So now we have people out there with their boots to the ground doing investigations, cases, working on all sorts of stuff. And now we need new checks and balances. So what does this do for morale, and what does this do for camaraderie? Completely destroys it. You know, we both said that we were hoping that these movements right now under Jessica Tish would be better for the rank and file and would be better for morale. But if anything, it's going to be far worse right now. How do we implement new overtime procedures? And now we're suppressing the overtime on the boots on the ground because of the failures at one police plaza by the upper echelon, by the job. And when I say the job, it's the people that have the keys to this job, and that's the chiefs, the upper echelon. Every chief is compromised because right now, I'm sure, and I said it to you offline, John, I bet you there's some commanders right now that are putting cops' feet to the fire, and they're cracking the whip right now because of overtime. And yet, the overtime that was abused has nothing to do with boots on the ground right now. Sleepy Joe, shout out to you, $5, coffee and donuts. Happy New Year's, lieutenants. Never seen a deputy chief or above get modified in a finest message until now. You're absolutely right. It's so egregious right now that they actually had to put it out in a finest message because John and myself and Sal Greco and Marlon Bethel and our friends and listeners on the podcast said, wait a minute, why is this information not transparent to the public? But again, I have a problem. Why was he modified? Should have been suspended. There's absolutely no rules. Again, they're trying to do further cover-up and trying to conceal what's going on. Latina Brown, good morning, lieutenants. Shout out to you, Latina. Good morning.
All right, so we got about 1,100 people on here this morning. Thank you for joining us. We were going to talk about John Chell replacing his mentor, Jeffrey Maddrey, and about 8 minutes before we were starting to do that, and we will get into that. We'll explore that 100%. But before we were about to do that, 8 minutes before we went live, we found out that Jeffrey Maddrey's home was raided and he was suspended around, I believe, 6:30 this morning. He was suspended from duty. A move that came as a shock to all of us because we were saying, why the hell wasn't he suspended immediately? Why the hell immediately upon these allegations? And I agree with you, Eric. So the what Tish's response has been up to date has been, we're going to allow the same arbitrary standard that IAB does not have, and the same arbitrary standard that the former police commissioners, disgraced police commissioners, all had, which is we're going to shield the people that are the major players that caused all these problems. And we're going to do that at the behest of Mayor Eric Adams. So if you guys can just do us a favor, like out, share out the space while we talk about that, we appreciate it. And so I agree with you, though. So the stance now is the NYPD is going to clamp down on overtime because overtime was being given out for on-duty booty. It was being given out to monitor a small podcast that nobody listens to. It was being given out to watch social media handles of former retired cops who live out of state, who did not contribute to the job, like Has Daughtry said, and now all of a sudden have a master plan on how to fight crime. So it was being given out for all of these different things. So now what Jessica Tish's response is going to be, hey, the people that are actually out on the streets of New York City, that are actually providing public safety, the people that are out on the subways, the people that are out on the streets, the people that are answering 911 calls, the people that are chasing men with guns, the people that are investigating all the crimes in the past, that are in the squads, that are in the enforcement units, let's clamp down on their overtime. You know the people I'm talking about, right? The people that have been leaving at a number that we've never seen before, ever in the history of the NYPD or New York City under this administration, under the Eric Adams administration. You know, those guys. Let's clamp down on them even more. Let's force them out of the job even more. Let's get all Tier 2A out of here. We don't want Tier 2 and Tier 2A. We don't want those guys anymore because those guys are very knowledgeable. Those guys know how to bring crime down. Those guys are the guys that criminals actually fear and don't want to come in contact to. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to hamper their overtime that's actually being worked and made because it provides public safety to New York City. And ultimately, yeah, you're right, Eric. There is no more morale in the NYPD. Is it going to crush it even further? Sure it is. Is it going to cause more people to retire? Sure it is. Is it going to cause more people to resign or vest early? Sure it is. It's going to do all those things. But the main thing that it's going to do, it's gonna hinder public safety like you've never seen before. And this is why. And why has public safety been hindered? Because Eric Adams is incompetent and he's complicit, and he allowed all of this. He appointed these people, and literally nobody's shocked by this. Well, we're not anyway, because we've been telling you it for 3 years.
I want to prove even further. Every chief is compromised. I've been saying this. I get a lot of opposition. I don't care. And I'm not wavering from this position, the stance I've taken the past 2 years. Every chief is compromised. And especially right now, when it comes to the overtime, Tiny Kinsella ultimately is responsible for the epic fail. And to show you that nothing has changed with the police department, I want to read just a quick excerpt. So it's been surfaced and circulated throughout the entire department right now. The subject is overtime management plan. It's to every commanding officer in the entire job right now. Every chief. Commanding officer, Criminal Justice Bureau, Professional Standards Division, Support Services, Patrol Service Bureau. Everyone is aware of this new overtime management plan. A fundamental responsibility of executive management. Listen to that. A fundamental responsibility of executive management. That's every chief on the job. Thank you for validating what I'm saying here. And the New York City Police Department is ensuring the appropriate use of overtime. Effective January 1st, 2025, the department will be implementing a uniform overtime management plan of abuse. Ensure adherence to department guidelines and aid in the well-being of members of the service. Accordingly, the Deputy Commissioner of Management and Budget will provide each bureau head with the uniform overtime thresholds prior to the start of each calendar month, based on the job function. These thresholds are by no means an entitlement. Ultimately, it is the responsibility of the bureau head to monitor overtime performance against the monthly uniformed overtime thresholds.
Wait, can you read that last line again? Can you read that last line again? I couldn't hear that.
Ultimately, it is the responsibility of the bureau head to monitor overtime performance against the monthly uniformed overtime thresholds.
Oh, wait. So are you saying that the chief of department was ultimately responsible for the overtime? Are you saying that the chief of patrol, the bureau head, was ultimately responsible for the overtime? Are you saying that the first deputy commissioner was ultimately responsible for the overtime?
Exactly.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's my point right now. If this was private industry, Tiny Kinsella would have been fired already. Every chief failed.
They all would have been. Overtime plan. They called them all into a conference room. Yeah, thank you. You're all fired.
You're all gone. Every one of them failed. This is the proof I've been saying. Every one of them is compromised and infected. Somehow it's effective now. It wasn't effective before. But now, January 1st, now every executive is held accountable. Nothing has changed. This is a joke. This is just more virtual signaling.
So just to show how full of shit that statement is, let's talk about the appointment of John Chell to chief of department. So John Chell's office, including numerous of his drivers, were on that top overtime list. So what happened? Did John Chell, because he was ultimately responsible for it, right? That's what that memo says. He was ultimately responsible for the overtime that happened in his office. The people who are now being investigated, both administratively and criminally, right? He was ultimately responsible for that. But only those guys got transferred. Only those guys are under investigation. And you know what he told them? I don't even know how long I'm going to be here. I can't do anything to help you. So as they all get sent to patrol and their careers are in limbo and their futures are in limbo, what happens to John Chell? He gets rewarded. He gets appointed to the chief of department. But she just told us that he was ultimately responsible for what they did. What we've been telling you for 3 years is these people are ultimately responsible for what happens underneath them. They didn't just allow it. They encouraged it. There's been overtime systems put in place for decades, and they work, and they're simple, and they're easy. Tanya Kinsella testified to in a sworn hearing before City Council. We have bi-weekly meetings on the overtime. Myself, as an integrity control officer, you know what I used to do? I used to print out the overtime every day, every week, every 14-day period, every 28-day period, and it all had every up-to-date minute of the overtime that was going on in my entire bureau. And I would bring it to my boss, and he would bring it to his boss, and everyone knew where everyone was at all times. And don't tell me now all of a sudden in the information age, and that was 3 years ago, by the way. That was 3 years ago, by the way. I'm sure now the checks that I had to do are all being self-generated, and you don't even need people like me anymore. The computer just pressing a button and they're coming out. I'm sure of it. I'm positive of it because I was building them myself while I was there. So I'm positive that that's where we're at now, where everyone just sees where everybody's at the minute they're in. There's no more calculation. There's no more need to create reports. The reports are being generated as the numbers are being put in. I'm positive of it. So now we're here to believe that, all of a sudden now you're ultimately responsible as a bureau head, except for John Chell, because I'm going to promote him.
I mean, everything's a knee-jerk reaction to this job as far as documenting when it was supposed to happen. This is what was supposed to be in place, which was in place, but now they're saying effective now, we're actually going to make sure you do your job. Those failures, we're going to it's just, it's a mistake right now. It costs the city millions, but that's okay. This is insane that John Chell is appointed to the chief of department. I think it's Logic's Finest who says it here, that Tish is not going to last. I think he says he's gonna bet Jessica Tish doesn't last. I'm trying to find these comments, the comments flying in, but if that's the case, I'll take that bet. I agree. I'm with you. I think that we may be headed for a fifth police commissioner, because if Jessica Tish's family is as powerful and smart as I believe they are, they're going to tell you know what? This is not working out. We had a plan, but clearly this is just tarnishing your good name. Jessica Tish, honestly, she's going down with the fishes. This is a terrible move. How do you move? Maddrey was the mentor to John Chell. John Chell is at the center of all these allegations. John Chell embarrassed the police department. John Chell, I mean, what's next? He's going to be the chief of the department. Is he going to stack his office with cocktails and we're going to have a bunch of whiskey sours in his office and standing ovations? I mean, this is what we have. We just replaced a monster with a bigger monster. With people that abuse their authority, immense power. John Chell does it publicly. At least I'll say for Jeffrey Maddrey, okay, he likes the ladies. Not saying it's right, but at least with the public, he knows how to play the game. He has much more of a calm demeanor. The community loves him. He is good when it comes to those aspects. He's great with the community. But for John Chell, he can't control himself. He can't play the same game. He's a fake tough guy. That triple fat neck, when he gets upset, you can see it start to get swollen. So we're going to see John Chell publicly embarrass the police department even further. And we're talking about the police department being a gulag. John, wait and see. He has the keys to the entire job. He's got the keys to the wheel.
Oh, we haven't seen anything yet. And that's why, 2025, the year starting off this month is going to be insane, dude. Honestly, it's already been insane. We had, in my opinion, 2 terrorist attacks already. I know our local and federal law enforcement agents are downplaying both of those attacks. I believe both of the men served together in the military at the same time. They both used the Toro app to rent those vehicles. Appeared to be coordinated and planned to me, but yet we hear, well, if it is a terrorist attack, it appears to be a lone wolf, and all that nonsense. And then we're seeing all this stuff that's coming out with the New York City Police Department, which we been telling you, right? We've been telling you every time when it came to the racketeering corruption scandal, what did we say? It's the tip of the iceberg. Then we talked about the overtime scandal. It's the tip of the iceberg. Then we talked about the on-duty booty. It's the tip of the iceberg. This is still yet to reveal its ugly head. I was speaking to a good friend last night, and he wasn't saying that Jessica Tish is going to be out of here soon. She probably will be by default, but he thinks it's now or never for Eric Adams, and he gave a good case as to why. He believes that Eric Adams will be hit with a superseding indictment this month, more towards the end of the month. He'll be hit with a superseding indictment, and he believes at that point, Governor Kathy Hochul will then have no choice but to remove Eric Adams from office. And why he believes that's going to be done is because this is the last month that you could actually do it and then have a special election. So it would be the least amount of time that Jumaane Williams would step into office. We did hear rumors that Jumaane Williams was putting together a transition team months ago. And I was like, you know what? I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it, but it's a very good theory. It's a very practical theory. I do think Eric Adams is going to get hit with a superseding indictment. And how he's still standing as the mayor is beyond me. So if Eric Adams goes, everybody goes. So we may see a fifth police commissioner, not necessarily in his term, but in one term, in one term of a mayor, because it'll be 4 under him. So it's possible. It's definitely a possibility. So we'll see. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think? I thought it was a pretty good theory. Again, it's his opinion. I'm kind of could see it. I could see it because I'll tell you right now, the feds seem to be heavily involved in what's going on with the NYPD. And don't think for one second the names that haven't been named in there. Well, they have been named in there. Just they've done a good perception versus reality job. Like you see here, these two, Tommy Kinsella, Tariq Shepard. Don't think for one second. If we wake up tomorrow morning and they're like, oh, the feds raided John Chell's home, I'm going to be like, oh, okay. What took them so long?
I think that theory is very lucid. I think it makes a lot of sense. It would make a lot of sense in normal politics, but with New York City politics right now, New York State politics, nothing makes sense. Everything's upside down. It's not a level playing field. I think it's a great theory, but I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think that Eric Adams is going to survive this month. I think that Eric Adams has a potential and a chance to actually make it through for re-election. I do think that if he could get himself a pardon, he can get it to re-election. I don't think that Eric Adams is going to be removed by Kathy Hochul. I agree with what you're saying, but I don't see it. I don't see it this time. I still think that she's timid and meek by the race card. I don't think she's going to move him. I think he was very confident. I watched his demeanor, the way he sat back in that Corey Pegues interview with Corey's Corner. I think he was very confident when he said he's not stepping down and headed for re-election. He's confident that they're not going to remove him, even with superseded indictments coming down. And we know that superseded indictments are coming down. We've heard credible sources in regards to that. But when it comes to this probe and this federal case with the police department, it's very slow moving. I think it's done by design, because as things play out, the feds do get more ammunition. Things are getting exposed, almost like our case, John. Our case with internal affairs, as time goes on, more things get exposed, more ammunition for our case. So I definitely think that I would say it's a great theory, but I don't know. I'm going to say that Eric Adams is not going to step down and not going to be removed.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know. I think everything's a 50-50 shot, but I don't know, man. I think we're gonna see some fireworks this month, bro. I think this is just the beginning. I think these moves that are being put in place are going to come back to bite Jessica Tish politically in the ass if she was looking to be the mayor. I thought she had a brilliant first couple of weeks, and I think she tarnished it all in the last couple of days. She did her handling of the overtime scandal was horrific, followed by her appointments surrounding it. Horrific, and the continued support for, oh, look, it's Daughtry congratulating Shell, but there's a picture of him there. Wow, shocker. and now allowing Daughtry to speak at the Times Square event. I don't want to hear about these stupid drones anymore. We know they're up there. They're a part of the public safety plan. It's a joke. Comparing this kid not inventing drones to utilizing drones, which, by the way, there was a program while he was still wearing white gloves, driving Jeffrey Maddrey around, setting up his dates and helping him to scheme on plotting the overtime and how they were going to use tax dollars to fund their own personal life. It's like we already had a drone program going. He didn't invent the wheel. The drone program was already there. Ask Tara. Had nothing to do with this kid. It was already there. Job was being held back, and now we had some questionable contracts come out, and now all of a sudden everybody's gonna jump on the bandwagon like this kid's Jack Maple, like he invented the CompStat procedure, like he was the one pushing the broken windows theory. No. The guy doesn't even know the law. He doesn't even know the Constitution. He's like, yeah, we're just going to take drones and we're going to fly them over your home and we're going to investigate you. It's like, no, dude, you're not, because this is America and you're not Stalin, bro. So it's not good. No, you're not. No, sorry. You should have got out and read a little bit. You should have got out and understood the country that you live in. You should have got out you should have got out and been a cop instead of driving around Jeff to go visit all his women, right? That's what you should have did. But you didn't. And to sit here and say that these two didn't know what was going on, I mean, anyone that's going to tell me that, I'll laugh right in your face. I'll laugh. I mean, their own offices and their own officers were involved in the overtime corruption scandal. They got it. It wasn't just, oh, by the way, it wasn't just John Chell's guys and Jeffrey Maddrey's guys. It was also Cass Daughtry's guys. It was also Tanya Kinsilla's guys. So we're going to sit here and be like, oh, but they didn't know. It's lit. Someone said it the other day. They said appointing John Chell is like taking out John Gotti as the head of the family and replacing him with Sammy the Bull Gravano. And I was like, yeah, you're right. You're 100% right. That's what it is.
Yeah, you're right. It's like let's take out the head, but let's take the guy that killed 20 people. Let's him take over. That's John Chell. He's the one who's trying to take off heads on social media, figuratively speaking, have these pissing matches, trying to suppress this podcast, trying to suppress First Amendment speech, trying to control the narrative. Let's make him the chief of department. Sure, that's a great representation for the NYPD, the largest police department in the entire world. Shout out to Tom Joyce. This is a great comment here. And Tom Joyce has great experience with investigations. How do the feds investigate and coordinate with the NYPD leadership at the same time? That's outstanding. I agree with you. That is a great comment. Absolutely. And shout out to Arbad. I missed this one here. Coffee and Donuts, 1999. My brother, how you doing? Thank you so much for everything. By the way, 2024, Arbad helped me out a lot with issues with my stalling. Great friend. Thank you so much. Arbad, Happy New Year, lieutenants. And all. As the idiots pushed out great cops and investigators, they obviously didn't realize those honed-in investigative skills would be used to expose the rampant corruption in Adams' administration, NYPD. Absolutely. It's just this is disgraceful what's going on. We're cutting corruption with more corruption. John Chell is part of this circle. The entire, as far as I'm concerned, I'll say it again, the entire upper echelon, every chief is compromised. I don't care. You can make a chief that's not really too much in the public eye right now and make him the chief of department. And to me, he's complicit also in these potential crimes that are going on at the upper echelon. Everyone knows, which is why that title recently done by Tina Moore was spot on when she said that what's going on with Maddrey is an open secret. Because everyone knows and no one does anything. And again, I have these conversations with cops and like, what are they supposed to do? That's always the question I get. I don't know. What do you mean, what are they supposed to do? At some point, some of these chiefs were supposed to band together and say, wait a minute, we have gone too far. We've pushed the needle. You want me to put pressure on my men and women for the excessive and abusive overtime that was not their fault and not their blame. It's the failure up top. And yet I'm supposed to crack the whip now for your mistakes to basically you're asking me to cover up. That's what they're doing. They're not telling you, they're not giving you a lawful order. They're asking you to cover and conceal their crimes by deflecting it to your men and women. So what you're doing is your silence is deafening. And these chiefs, as they push and implement this overtime plan, They're deflecting from the criminality up top. You're actually helping them. And believe me, that bus, just like when it came to when it was World War II, when the Nazis were out there, and people turned a blind eye until they came for them. Well, guess what? If you don't step up, that bus is coming for you too. If they can drive the bus right over Paul Sarasano, who came back from retirement to work with Maddrey, what will they do to you? I hear it from some cops, not the overwhelming majority, but some of the cops tell me this administration's great, how much overtime they're getting. And I said, you know what? It's going to be short-lived. This is not sustainable. And here we are. Are they still saying it? This is a pinnacle moment here. This appointment for John Chell as Chief of Department, we might as well say, hey, let's get the biggest bully and let's give them the largest police department in the entire world, and let's do an experiment. Let's see how that works out. Just think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that was Eric Adams. That was him. This is, I believe all of these moves are Eric Adams ultimately running his perception versus reality campaign. I believe he has some people guiding him in the background on how to do that to make it look like there's actually things happening to change the corruption up top. But Eric Adams is unwilling to get rid of everyone because he knows what's going to happen. As much as he says there's a lot of people that, they're so happy and they were so happy to be working for him and they're still good friends. I think court cases are going to tell a totally different tale if Trump doesn't get involved. And squash all these investigations. Because if these investigations get to play out, I think what you're going to see is all the people that Eric Adams says are his friends. You're going to see they're not his friends at all. And they're telling you exactly what happened in his administration. Shout out to Tabitha Foster. She donated $9.99 to the podcast. She says, hit the like and share button for this podcast. Thank you, Tabitha. We appreciate it. We got about 1,400 people on here. If you guys could do that, we appreciate it, whatever platform you're on. Also on X and on Instagram, we both use our own names at John D. Macari and at Eric Dim Cop. So if you guys could follow us there too, we appreciate it. I think a couple of things. One, just to go back onto what Tom Joyce said, is how the hell do the feds work with the upper echelon of the NYPD? It's simple to answer that question. Tom knows the answer, right? He was just he was joking. The question is, they don't. That's the question. Think about that. So let's think about that. 2025, we started off with, I believe, 2 terrorist attacks across the country, one in Las Vegas, the other in New Orleans. And then we had a mass shooting occur last night in Queens. Chief of Patrol was quick to say not a terrorist attack. I beg to differ. Maybe it wasn't an international terrorist attack, but it was definitely domestic terrorism. I mean, if shooting 11 to 13 people in one scenario isn't considered terror on a mass casualty event, I don't know what is. But they're quick to downplay everything that's going on. And just think, I consistently hear there are no credible threats towards New York City. I understand what they're trying to say is they don't have any information that anything's imminent. But to say there is no credible threats ever towards New York City is a complete lie. I would never make that statement. There are currently no credible threats to New York City. I mean, does anyone believe that? Does anyone, there are no credible threats? And it's the number one terrorist target in the world. It's the number one terrorist target in the world. There are literally magazines and these propaganda videos showing New York City blowing up like that. It's pretty credible to me. It's a pretty credible threat to me. And now we have a police department that can't be trusted with confidential information, especially when it relates to foreign entities and foreign governments. Oh, why is that? Oh, because they were taking money from foreign entities and foreign governments. Oh, really? Oh, yeah. No, not only were they traveling to these countries for reasons unbeknownst to all of us, because Eric Adams told you it's an international police department, just like his office. And then when he was the Brooklyn Borough president, it was an international borough, right? Brooklyn was an international borough. So he's taking all money from foreign governments. All this stuff's going on. All this corruption's going on. And obviously, these people can't be trusted with sensitive information. And I can't sit there and say I blame the feds. I just don't know how anyone hasn't stepped in and took the police department on the federal receivership at this point. Because honestly, at this point, this is where it needs to be. I don't see any other way around it at this point. I really don't. I don't see any other way around. If you want to clean up the corruption in the NYPD, I know it's hard. This isn't like any other department, right? There's over 50,000 employees. The amount of 911 calls and jobs they come in. I honestly think that I don't think the feds even have the manpower to come in and take over the NYPD, and I think that's why they haven't, because it's a huge responsibility. But the NYPD, as it relates to corruption, should fall under federal receivership and how corruption's investigated and handled. I think the NYPD, both the NYPD and the DOI, should fall under federal receivership. I don't think that the federal government has the manpower to look at the police department as a whole. And I think when we look at the corruption now, it's completely different from any corruption we've had in the past. The corruption now is the NYPD is systemically corrupt, like we've been telling you for 3 years. It's systemically corrupt, but from the top. Only in the upper echelon of the NYPD is it systemically corrupt. When you look at the rank and file of the NYPD, they're being used and abused, but they're going out and doing their job. You don't really see the corruption scandals like the Michael Dowd and all that. And you do, but when you do, those people are held accountable and they're fired and they're terminated and they're put in jail. And those people get held accountable. So that's not the issue. The issue's up top. So it's that portion that I believe that the Fed should come in and take over and put under federal receivership. It's the corruption aspect of it coming from those top offices. That's who should fall under federal receivership. And unfortunately, what the feds are going to do is really scrutinize this federal overtime, and that's going to fall onto the rank and file again. And again, that's wrong. It's because of people like these two idiots that I have up on the screen whose fault that is.
Ultimately, the rank and file pays for the mistakes of the upper echelon. That's why it's so important who is in leadership in an organization. It's unfortunate in any organization, if there's a failure at leadership, it's always going to be the lower ranks or the lower positions, especially with the police department, that ultimately pay for it. No matter what, I don't agree with this overtime plan. I think it's absolutely so egregious. I think it's atrocious that every chief will comply with these measures when it's the upper echelon that administer these mistakes, and they're responsible for the excessive overtime, the abuse, the millions of dollars that were spent for taxpayer money in New York City that affected the residents and also public safety. And the rank and file now with these measures is the responsibility of the upper echelon. But unfortunately, in any organization, that's why it's so important that we have the proper leadership in place, because it ultimately affects the lower position. So no matter what, the rank and file will be affected by this. And John, you and I have said it on the onset of the investigation surrounded with Ed Caban, that it was not the tip of the spear and that we need federal oversight. And this is just going to be a spoke on the wheel with the numerous aspects and the appearances of potential corruption that we have seen for 2 years with this upper echelon. There's no doubt about it. We need federal oversight right now. We need the feds to step in. And I'm going to say it again. We need every chief removed right now to clean house. And I do believe this is, and I won't say it will be, this is the worst corruption scandal to ever hit the legacy of the New York Police Department. We've had corruption scandals that were so egregious that involved potential homicides, involved drug dealing. What was surrounded by Michael Dowd was atrocious. But that was isolated to Michael Dowd, some cops, and that could be cut out. Unlike this, which is a cancer and just spreads throughout the entire department and affects the entire organization, and it affects it to the lower ranks and goes all the way up to Eric Adams. So it involves your local politicians, it involves the police department. There's absolutely no trust and no credibility. This is the worst corruption scandal to ever hit the legacy of the NYPD. No doubt about it.
Tom, shout out $1.99 to the podcast. How will federal grants be managed with the caps? Great question, Tom. I don't know. I don't know what these idiots are going to do. We'll see what they're going to do. If I had to bet, I would say exactly what they've been doing is what they're going to do, because they're not forward-thinking people, and there's no way they're going to come up with a different plan. So exactly how they've been handling these federal grants is exactly how they're going to continue to handle them. I just don't see anybody as forward-thinking. I think Jessica Tish is forward-thinking, but I don't think the rest of them. And I think she's going to take a lot of advice from people that are actually on when it relates to that. She's got a lot to learn, in this whole job. So I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. What did what's his face say? JuJu. He said, like and share this podcast for self-promotion, right? Saying that me and Eric is self-promoting. We're not self-promoting. It's just the fact of the matter is the mainstream media, all of even the independent media at this point, is bought and sold. And they try to shape a narrative. We're not shaping a narrative. I have nothing to gain by telling you that John Chell and Kaz Daughtry are idiots. I have nothing to gain. I have nothing to gain by telling you that Jeffrey Maddrey was incompetent and an idiot. We have nothing to gain by telling you that. We have everything to lose. We're first of all, we're diminishing the department we work for. We're tarnishing the name of the department we work for. We're putting ourselves at odds with people who have immense power. We have absolutely nothing to gain by it. But unfortunately, people need to understand what's going on. They need to understand this perception versus reality. So while New York City and the mainstream corporate media are bringing you the perception, it's podcasts like this that are actually bringing you the reality. We're giving an honest perspective from two flunky cops, right? We washed out of the NYPD, right? Right. And so, I think the narrative we're painting here is very important, because it's the actual narrative of the rank and file. It's the actual voice of the voiceless, the people that you don't hear, not the people that are grandstanding, holding the mayor's water, like everything's fine, crime's down, don't worry, subways are safe. No, we're not. It's not the voice of the unions, who are completely complicit in all of this, by the way, and aren't going to say anything about the corruption going on in the NYPD and the misuse and abuse of their own members. No, we're telling you exactly the conversations that are happening in the patrol car, the conversations that are happening in the locker room, the conversations that are happening at home, at people's dinner tables. We're telling you the conversations from the people who aren't allowed to speak. So is it self-promotion? Maybe, but this is an important voice. This is an important platform, and everybody knows it.
Even if it was self-promotion, obviously we're going to promote our podcast. But what's the difference? The difference is this is our podcast. This is New York's finest retired Unfiltered podcast. John Chell, Jeffrey Maddrey, Tariq Shepard, and Kaz Daughtry, and these monsters that are at the upper echelon of the police department. And thank God Maddrey's out, but John Chell is still there. They're not promoting the police department. They're promoting themselves. They're promoting themselves and projecting the police department as if they own it, as if the money in the police department is theirs. The cars in the police department are theirs, and everything in the police department is what they own. So when they promote themselves, they're not promoting the police department. They're not promoting the rank and file. John Chell promotes John Chell. Kaz Daughtry promotes Kaz Daughtry. So it's ironic that they want to point fingers. So don't throw stones when you live in a glass house. At the same token, the rank and file ultimately suffers for the mistakes, and not mistakes. These are intentional. These are intentional and deliberate, just complete theft. What's going on at the upper echelon? This is a complete criminal enterprise that's going on here, and it's deliberate. These are not even mistakes or errors in good judgment. This is intentional, what they're doing with the police department, and they're fully aware, and they know exactly how the police department works. They've been there for 30 some odd years, especially John Chell, and he knows that ultimately it trickles down to the rank and file. And the rank and file pays for this with the external pressures that's going on right now with the public, the trust and credibility that they lose, if any, that they had left, and ultimately the internal pressures of the NYPD. And we see it right now with that. I just read to you a brief excerpt from the overtime management plan. These are the internal pressures. So think about it, John. Some of these cops got very accustomed to working 50 and 60 hours of overtime a month because of the crime problem right now, the mass exodus, the shortage. They got very comfortable with that. And now The rug has been completely swept underneath them, and they're losing a substantial amount of money. And so I'm sure a lot of these cops are probably not even doing paid detail right now because they've been supplemented. It's subsidized with overtime. And that's why, unfortunately, you have to live within your means, not your overtime means, because it could be short-lived. But who pays for it? It's the rank and file. The rank and file that has nothing to do with what's going on at one police plaza. I mean, we just saw, whether it's sex or whatever the case is, why Lieutenant Epps got such an excessive amount of overtime, and we replaced it with John Chell, who's going to the Chief of Department, and his driver, Lieutenant Brennan, is at the top of that list. The third top earner in the entire police department. So we just cut corruption with more corruption. It doesn't make any sense.
We're getting excuse me. We're getting rid of everybody else because they allowed an egregious amount of overtime to happen, except for John Chell. We're going to promote him. That's good. Excuse me. Sorry.
You gonna make it?
Still a little under the weather, people. Sorry. New York's really been wonders for me. It's been working out wonders. But yeah, no, I'm not sounding too good. You're right, Dirt. Yeah. Dirt 925. So go, because I gotta take a drink, bro. Go.
You're right there. I was feeling like that a couple of weeks ago. I still have the remnants of some of a cough. But I mean, look at this picture right there. This is just such a media op right here. But this says, hey, to me, look at this. It says a lot, right? We did a movie review. We could do a review of this photo right now. It's like John Chell, looking at Kaz Daughtry and that smile. It's like, we own this job. So, yeah, we self-promote this podcast? Absolutely we do. We have every right to. We're promoting this podcast. Our friends and listeners are promoting this podcast. And we're promoting right and wrong. And I don't think that we're painting anything. I think it's almost like a little kid. Remember a little kid when you were in school and you learned how to trace pictures? That's what we're doing. We're not painting anything about the police. We're just tracing over what's going on right now. They're the ones, John Chell, Kaz Daughtry, Tariq Shepard, Jeffrey Maddrey, the entire upper echelon of the police department is the one that painted this picture of appearance of impropriety, appearance of corruption that's going on with the police department, this embarrassing representation of the police department, not us. The only difference is because of this podcast, because of our friends and listeners and this network that we built together, we're actually exposing it. So they weren't able to cover it and conceal it like they've done before. And this administration happens to be the most egregious and most atrocious. So there's a lot of people out there that were ambitious while they were working in the police department. John McCarry, Eric Dim, Sal Greco, Marlon Bethel, thousands of others. They were ambitious while they're on the job, and they're ambitious now, and they're exposing what's going on with this upper echelon. So if it wasn't for us and many others, this would have been swept under the rug, and this would have been hidden from the public just like they normally do. And that's the difference from right now. We're not painting it. We're tracing what's going on. They have tarnished the police department. They have tarnished the representation of the police, not us.
Yeah, no, 100%. So I think Patrick Donahue is going to get a few more phone calls and late night text messages. He says, here's the recap. An MOS involved in a questionable on-duty shooting and a questionable off-duty shooting is made chief of department. First step who failed to monitor OT is still in office. Great recap. That's exactly what happened. So here's the other thing, right? A lot of people on here, I don't know, I forget who was saying it, but they said no overtime cap. I don't agree at all with that statement. I think there needs to be an overtime cap. I don't think that overtime cap needs to be focused around on you can only do 30 hours a month. You could only do X amount if you're in this rank because of your salary. I'm not saying that at all. I think that people that are on the ground, boots on the ground, and people that are investigators should get the majority of the overtime, as well as they should get the discretionary promotions. The lion's share of discretionary promotions should go to the people that do the actual job. Like I said, when I was in ICO and I was like building systems and all these other things inside of facilities management, that was the closest I ever came to getting the money. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. And everyone's like, you're going to get the money. And I'm like, I don't even deserve the money. I have the money. I'm like sitting in this office. I make my own hours. I have a take-home car. I get a little bit of overtime. Like, why the hell would I get the money here? Like, I'm not even doing the job anymore. So I think the lion's share of the overtime and the lion's share of the discretionary promotions and the promotions detective go to the people who are in the core mission of the job, right? But I think there needs to be an overcap. There needs to be an overtime cap to save you people from yourselves. There has to be a reasonable standard. I mean, we're a statistical analysis driven society and department at this point. We can't figure out what's humanly possible to not do in a day, the amount to not do in a week, the amount of overtime to not do in a month, where it becomes extremely unhealthy and actually diminishes the quality of your work, the quality of your mental health and your physical health. We can't figure that out. And that's what the overtime cap should be. Because if you're a homicide detective and you're investigating a horrific murder, let's just put the example of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. There's got to be standards to keep you safe. And listen, you're going to roll around the clock. You're going to go home. You're going to shower. You're going to eat. You're going to come right back in. This is going to be on your mind, and you're going to be focused on this for maybe 30 to 90 days, depending on the investigation, right? Depending on how far. 90 days, you're going to be so focused on this case. I get that you're going to make a lot of money. And you should. But we shouldn't let you kill yourself in the process of doing it. We shouldn't let you run yourself into the ground. Because I've been there. You've been there. I've made arrests that went past 48 hours, and 48 hours in, the guy confesses to something, and next thing I know, I'm going to get a search warrant. And I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like being up for 3 days. You're wired on coffee. You're throwing up because you're so tired and your body's telling you to go to bed. I know what that feels like. And it's not a good feeling. And it's not healthy. And it's not healthy for you in the short term. It's not healthy for you in the long term. So, yes, I believe there should be an overtime cap. And I believe the fact that the NYPD at this point hasn't put in safeguards in place for what's a safe amount of overtime for an individual to do it tells me right there they don't give a shit about your mental or physical health, and they don't care about you in the long term. You know, if this was the NFL has all these things in place, right? If all these things in place of how long you could play, how long you can't play. Even the NBA, right? They keep you out of games. No, he's played too much. We got to keep him down. It's prone to an injury at this point. You know, and not only that, it's like we're paying you all this money, and the quality of your work is all the way on the floor because you can't even see what you're doing. You can't recall what you're writing. You're writing things and you're making mistakes because you're so tired. Why haven't we put those safeguards in place? And that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that, I care about the budget of New York City. No, it costs, public safety costs money, and people should make money that are involved in it. And you're never going to make what you deserve, but you should at least have the ability to properly investigate the case and get paid for the investigation. You shouldn't be doing it for free, like most of you continue to do. But then on top of that, having those safeguards in place will stop something like EPS from ever occurring again, right? It's like, wait a minute, time out. How are you putting in for 80 hours this week? Excuse me. How would you do that? You're not allowed to do that. You can't do that. You know, and it would have stopped it right there. But we'll just keep the same players in place. We'll play musical chairs. We'll keep everything going exactly the same.
John, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I just want to say maybe we could call Lieutenant Epps and say, hey, what point did you get so tired that you had to start doing overtime from home? I think that's our case study right there.
Oh, shit.
Rob Lucas, shout out to you, brother. Coffee and donuts, $9.99. Thank you so much. Coffee and donuts for Eric. Hall's cough drops for John. Yeah, John, I think you need to be quarantined. But I mean, I agree with you. There should be rules in place. There should be rules in place of and there are, right? There's rules in place of how many hours you should have between tours if you're actually going to be behind the wheel, right? It's meant for your own health. It's meant for your safety. It's actually meant for the safety of others. But the same goes for you actually being out there doing work itself. And I agree with you. Because if you're out there and you burn the oil on both ends, if you're so tired to the point that you're not even productive anymore and you're just there, then we're not getting a good product of you anyway. So for one, you're not yielding and producing good results because you're just so exhausted and you're destroying your body. So it's not healthy. So on both ends, it's not good. So I agree with you. They should. Now, don't get me wrong. I do agree there should be measures in place. But at the same time, I do believe in exceptions. There may be something that's just so pinnacle, so important that for this particular case, you are going to go above those hours. But, case by case basis. I don't know what the number is yet. I think we should ask Lieutenant Epps, but to get an idea. But there should be some type of number, at least a threshold, a standard that we know, okay, when you get to this point, it's just too much. The body starts to shut down. Maybe we see performance levels drop. I mean, but there's a case by case. For me, I mean, I know I don't require much sleep. If I sleep 4 or 5 hours, I'm fine. I can get behind the wheel. I mean, everybody's different. Most people require about 7 to 8 hours of sleep. But we have to go by, we're talking about the overwhelming, the general population of the NYPD. We have to go by what the overwhelming majority would be normal. So I would think that we have to have those metrics in place to keep them safe, keep them healthy. But again, the police department doesn't care. I mean, they didn't care about Epps either. Honestly, they let her do so much overtime knowing that if she gets caught, she's going to be criminally liable. And they just threw her under the bus. So you know what? She fired back. And really, she's the one that showed that this can opens from the inside, not Jessica Tish. If it wasn't for Lieutenant Epps reaching out to Eric Sanders and coming out with this case, this would have been swept under the rug like everything else. We would have said, wow, she vested out 8 months early. Wow, it doesn't look good. And they would have just kept on business as usual.
So G Walls 77, he says it gets to the point you're so tired you can't even work. Now you're just stealing hours. See, I mean, some of the stuff around policing, because of chain of custody, you're going to need the actual officer that recovered the evidence or the officer that made the arrest to be there. So I'm not saying that these people are stealing. What I'm saying is there needs to be an overtime cap. But yes, I agree with Eric. We can never say never in policing because it's so dynamic. You can never say never. And in that case, I think people should get paid to sleep. We need you here. I'm not kidding. We need you here, John. We need you here. It is what it is. Like you have to go to court in the morning, go downstairs and go to sleep for 3 hours on overtime. And then and go take a shower, go relax. There needs to be things put in place to protect cops from themselves.
Sorry, I gotta laugh, but wasn't that what Epps was doing?
Well, yeah, I mean, but not an administrative timeout, not an administrative position, I'm talking about enforcement only positions. Do you get paid to sleep? On duty booty, absolutely not. Administrative positions, absolutely not, unless you're involved in some type of outdoor operational thing that's going on, and you're outside on the street too. I think then people should actually get paid to sleep. When I was a rookie, I had a great sergeant. Shout out Tommy McCauley. By the book guy, midnight guy. I was a rookie. I was doing midnights. I just got sent to the 123, and they were having like a pattern of car break-ins. And I seen this kid walking around right before the end of my tour, and he looked like he was looking in windows. So I just drove past him, like, I'm in the patrol car, I'm in uniform. I drove past him, I park around the block, and I sneak up on him in uniform. And sure enough, he's in the car. So I grab him in the car. He's got a bag filled with shit in it. And at the time, it was GPSs he had in the car. He was stealing GPSs, sunglasses, all this stuff, right? So it turned out to be the guy for an entire borough pattern. So when I got him, I brought him back. I had to find the initial arrest, whose car that was. That took me a little while, right? So I got the initial complainant. He's under arrest. Then what I was doing is I was hitting go home on all the GPSs and finding all the other complainants. Then I had property that I couldn't identify. So the case detective that had the pattern, for that precinct was like, this isn't my guy. And he wanted to go home and he left. So the squad sergeant at the time was a maniac. He goes into the detective's case files and he throws them at me and he goes, go through all of these and find out which property you have. So I'm like, holy crap. So now I'm like, I'm about like 2 days into this arrest. I rearrested this guy a ton of times. And then I had to turn back into another midnight. So I was like, I called my sergeant and I'm like, listen, I'm like, I can't even see anymore. Like, I need to go home. I need to go to sleep. Like, I'm throwing up. Like, I don't feel good anymore. Like, I can't do it. Like, I have to go to sleep. He's like, kid, don't worry about it. Just go downstairs and go to sleep. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, go downstairs and go to sleep. When you wake up in the morning, sign out and go home. And I'm like, okay. And he carried me that whole tour. And, technically by the book, it was wrong, but morally and for my health, it was correct. And so when I'm in my head, I'm a rookie. I'm like, I shouldn't be doing this. I'm like afraid, to like sleep on duty. But I'm like, at the same time, I couldn't even help it. So I actually did get a good night's sleep because I was knocked out. I actually woke up way past when my tour was over. and I was like, where the hell am I? And, so he carried me. And I think sometimes things like that need to happen on the job. And we don't have anything in place where, this guy's not working. He's not working. Yeah, he's required to come back in, but he's not working. He's not going back in. So shout out to, supervisors that think outside the box.
I'm laughing because it sounds kind of funny, but I actually think you're right. And isn't there a group of people that get paid on a biweekly basis that are supposed to help members of the service with contracts? I think they're called unions. Oh, yeah. Yeah, those guys, right.
Well, they're sleeping with their eyes open.
Hey, maybe, listen, and we know you watch a podcast, so maybe PBA, SBA, DEA, LBA, CA, maybe you could actually start working out in a contract that, and I think it's actually a good idea, John. I'm laughing, but it's a good idea. Maybe those guys, unions, right? No, benevolent associations and endowment associations. Maybe we can come out contractually that if you work so many hours, you're entitled to an hour nap. Or because I've actually read about this stuff. Usually, like a 20, 30-minute cat nap is actually better for you throughout the day than sleeping an hour and a half, 2 hours. So maybe after working 8 hours, you're entitled to an hour nap before you're going to work 8 hours. And it actually makes sense because if you have an hour nap and you're it's almost like recharging the battery. If you're going to stay there because of chain of custody, your next 8 hours will probably produce better results than if you didn't have that nap instead of those 8 hours. I mean, we've seen it. We've all worked in precincts, active retired members here, anyone in an outside law enforcement agency. We've seen it when the cops work so many hours. You walk into the precinct and you see them sitting on the desk, or the TS, and they're just, they're trying to hold their own head up because they're so tired. So it would make sense. I think that those union guys, maybe if they have time, they can come up with something in the contract to get the guys some sleep. I mean, they're doing such a good job out there advocating for the men and women. Maybe they can come up with something. But I agree with you, John. I think you're right. I think it's pretty smart.
No, I think it's terrible, And I was scared of the sergeant too because he was by the book. So he was so by the book that I was shocked when he said it to me. I was like, "This guy set me up." He's like, "No, just go downstairs." So he's like, "Bro, you can't stay up anymore. You've been up for 2 days. Like, just go to sleep. Don't worry about it." And the lieutenant was fine with it. Everybody was, and it was like, but there's something that shouldn't have been up to him to be a good supervisor. It should just be put in place to protect you for in that case when you get a terrible supervisor. Because I mean, I've had so many great supervisors, but I've encountered a few supervisors that were absolutely horrific. Thankfully, the majority of them I encountered was when I was already a supervisor, so I got to tell them where to go and what to do. But it is it's such a tough job, man. It's such a tough call to say never, never. And I get you, but I really am an advocate for overtime caps and putting things in place to protect the workers. The fire department does it. The fire department protects their guys. Like, they sleep at work. They'll give them overtime to do other things. They'll be on overtime sleeping, right? To keep themselves healthy and awake, right? Or in between those calls. And that's not healthy either, the constant waking up. I'm not saying that, but at least they protect their guys. They put their guys in the right place. When guys are injured, they take care of them. They give them a week off, whatever it is. They give them some downtime after traumatic events. You get into a traumatic event in the NYPD, they're like, all right, yeah, get back out there, kid. You did a great job. Pat on the butt and see you later.
I'm not reading all these comments, but some of them are hilarious. These comments are coming in, they're hilarious, but I'm not going to read them out. They're a little inappropriate. But
I see you looking at that.
But it's funny to talk about the fire department. I think they have to count more hours that how many hours are actually awake compared to how many are asleep. But I do think there should be something in place. It does make sense. You have a meal break. You need to recharge your battery, but to get some sleep. If you're going to work 16 hours, it would be nice if you had a break in between. We actually take a nap. Maybe you take a shower. Especially in the summertime, you're sweating. I think that rejuvenates you. I used to like to do that during my tour on a real hot day. I would go and take a shower and put on a fresh uniform and feel rejuvenated. Like, okay, wow, I got another 8 hours ahead of me. Get something good to eat, something good to eat, take a shower, and you feel like, okay, I'm ready to go. Paul's New York City beat 5896. Thank you so much for being here, all the time friend and listener. Happy New Year to you, brother. Coffee and donuts. Here we go. We slept all the time in Narco on overtime, waiting to speak to the ADA. After throwing 10 in the P-van, a smelly, dirty couch was the norm. LOL. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there are smelly couches all over the place, but when you're so tired, it's the best feeling. And I agree. I would take care of my people too. When I saw they were just so exhausted, like, listen. You worked so many hours on this gun. Go take an hour nap, and I'll come get you. Go take an hour nap, take a shower, get rejuvenated, and then we'll pick you up. And then you could see they showered, they had something to eat, a cup of coffee, they took a nap, and now they're ready to go. They rejuvenated. But just to keep burning that midnight oil, it's not good. It's not healthy. 100% right, and you're not getting anything out of them. And especially if you're out there and you're going to be in the street. You want their eyes. I always said, some people would tell me, like, how do you judge when you should go sick or, when it's time to go limited? And I would say you have to make a fair assessment, right? And say, if you're working with someone out in the street, are you there to support them and help them? Or are you actually going to hinder them? So if you're so sick that they have to take care of you and you're so tired you can't pay attention and they have to watch everything, you're actually hindering them. So you need to be sharp and you need to be there to be supportive and to actually be a benefit. But if you're going to take somebody down because you're so tired or you're injured, your back is out and you can't do anything, well, then you have to make an honest assessment.
Yeah, no, I agree. And somebody on here said that sergeant probably saved your life by not letting you drive home. And it's true, because we've had numerous cops die on the way home from work after doing doubles and triples. And now doing doubles and triples is the norm. It's the norm in the police department. You're doing a double and triple. And most people will never know what that feels like. I think like I said, like the being a first responder, particularly in the NYPD, it's so carcinogenic, just the schedule, man. It just kills you. You're doing double, triples. It's crazy. And then on top of that, you think you're going to go home and sleep, but like, I always had a very understanding wife. Like, she never bothered me at all. Like, if I, she'd be calling me like, you better come home and go to sleep. But just your own personal, like, you hadn't seen your kids in 3 days, in 2 days. You hadn't seen your wife. And then something's going on. It might be one of their birthdays. It might be someone in your family member and your family's birthdays. And you don't want to miss your entire life while being a cop either. So, it's funny. I look at pictures of myself, when I was on the job, and I'm like, oh my God, I look like death, bags under my eyes. And my wife is like, yeah, that's always how you look. And I told the story before. I was in the hospital with my daughter when she was young. And this woman just comes over to me and she goes, "You're a cop?" So, and I'm like, I hadn't slept in like 2 days. And I was like, "Why do you say that?" And she goes, "Because my husband was a cop. And I'll never forget that look in his face when you hadn't slept in 2 days." And she goes, "And you have that exact look right now." And I was like, "Yeah." And then we started talking. Nice lady, worked in Staten Island North Hospital. Her husband was an inspector, retired real young, retired with 20 years on the job. I forget his exact name. I think his name was Jack. I think he's a financial consultant now. But yeah, it's funny, man. It's like, no one knows that until you experience that, And like when I talk to my friends that are in the fire department, they could never understand it. They're like, "What do you mean you were up for 3 days?" I'm like, "Dude, I was up for 3 days, bro. Like, I can't come out tonight. I can't do it." And so yeah, shout out to everybody letting their guys sleep, because that is a big thing. Driving home, and I'm not gonna lie. I drove home one day, fell asleep at a red light, stopped at a red light, and when I woke up, I looked at the car next to me because the light was green, and it was another cop sleeping at the red light too, where I had to beat my horn to wake him up. True story. It's crazy. So, but let's get back. We got 1,700 people on here. Let's get back onto the corruption scandal. So, obviously, John Chell is appointed as chief of department. That is not even a questionable appointment. It's a horrible appointment. Horrible. I mean, he said it himself numerous times. Jeffrey Maddrey was his mentor. He was directly in the middle of all of this, as well as Kaz Daughtry, as well as Tommy Kinsella, as well as Tariq Shepard. And, and that's because people in their own offices were transferred as a result of this overtime scandal. Their main go-to guys, their number one drivers, were transferred as a result of this overtime scandal. So while they're still there is insane. But breaking this morning, Jeff Maddrey's finally suspended. He's finally suspended from duty, a move that we said should have came initially. We're like, wait, what? Why is he not suspended? Why is Epps suspended, but Maddrey's not suspended? Then we see yesterday his executive officer turned commanding officer in that office gets modified, but the guy that was the commanding officer didn't get modified. The majority of the time didn't get modified. So it's real questionable things going on. And then we're like, well, why was he suspended? Why was Jeffrey Maddrey? Why did Jessica Tish all of a sudden wake up this morning and suspend Jeffrey Maddrey? It's like, oh, the feds raided his house this morning. That's why. So, Eric, I got a question. Like, everything's obviously speculation at this point. We don't have anything as to why the feds raided several places of Jeffrey Maddrey's. And it was the Southern District of New York. Do you think in any way that all of these corruption scandals will eventually turn out to become intertwined as it relates to the contracts, as it relates to pay-for-play promotions, transfers, overtime, racketeering, extortion? Do you think that if there was a proper investigation done, that everything's going to be intertwined and all the players are going to be together?
I think that was the key word that you just said. If they're properly investigated, then I think that all the aspects and all the potential corruption going on, the different appearances of impropriety, different search warrants, the different raids, different members of service that have had their phones taken, I think that this is all going to weave together. I think it's all connected. I think there's a nexus on every level, including the sex scandal. I think it's all connected. So there's no doubt in my mind. With that being said, just going back real quick, John, there's a question for you. I hope that you're going to answer it. So Tom says $1.99. Coffee and donuts. Here we go. How is the back blown out, JM?
No comment.
No comment. And there's another one. More coffee and donuts. I like saying this one, even though I'm not Italian. I think it's pretty cool. I like this last name. Frankie Palagucci, 333, $4.99, coffee and donuts. But he says empanadas and cafecito. Very good stuff. God is always watching 2025. You're right. You're right. God is always watching. John, I just think that I think this is all weaved together. I just, at this point, I'm confident that we could never move forward with internal affairs being an internal source of the police department. maybe for other police departments on a small level, but with the NYPD, with the system that we have in place, with the heavy weight of the upper echelon that we have a very top-heavy police department. We have a lot of chiefs on this job who have an immense power over the job and over internal affairs. I think it has to be outsourced at some point. We could not go forward. And I think the only reason that Jeffrey Maddrey is suspended is because of this search warrant that was conducted. I don't think it has anything to do with Lieutenant Epps as far as why he's being suspended. I just think it's coincidental, and nothing's coincidental, and gives Jessica Tish the opportunity to give the illusion that it's connected to this scandal, that she's the one cleaning house. From my assessment, based on my observations, everything that I've seen, I think the house is cleaning itself, but it's not really cleaning itself. It's almost like we swept some dirt and we just put the pile into another spot. Because moving John Chell to the chief of department is just exactly that. We swept a little dirt. We replaced it with more dirt. They took out group one, and it makes no difference right now because I don't care who you replace there. The bottom line is they're going to report, and they're going to be under the thumb of John Chell. And I think this is going to be far worse than before because every allegation that we made includes John Chell, his underlings, and his connections. So there's no doubt in my mind that we're going to be further stonewalled and our investigations go nowhere.
Oh, I agree. So I think we need to explain, because I see a lot of questions I'm getting about Jeffrey Maddrey, about how he was suspended post-retirement, right? So I think we need to get into the retirement system a little bit. All right. So, and I think a lot of cops don't understand this either, because I've even heard like 30-year people like where they don't understand this. So when you're in the police department, you accrue time. 2-star thieves and above get paid out for their time. They could get a check submitted for their time, but nobody else. And that's very few people. The majority of people in the NYPD accrue time. Some time is contractual and you get it depending on the days you work. You just accrue it. Some people perform overtime and put in for time and add other time. When you're in the executive rank, executives accrue a lot of time because they can't get cash. Only certain captains at a very short window can get overtime. So executives, captain, and an executive is a captain and above. So captains and above usually accrue a lot of time. So traditionally, you could submit for retirement, let's say today, but your effective date could be 3 years from now. Your effective date could be 3 days from now, depending on how much time you accrue. So, couple of things. While you're running your time, you're technically still a member of the New York City Police Department, right? Because you're getting paid. You're technically still a member of the police department. When I retired, because I knew I was going to get into a legal battle with the NYPD and I knew I would be targeted because of that, what I did was I had some time on the books. I had about 3 or 4 months on the books. So what I did was when I retired, I immediately turned in all my stuff and submitted for my firearm, my pistol permit, my good guy letter, and my retired ID card. Most people wait to do that until their effective date, which will either be that 3-day window or that 3-year window, depending on how much time they are. So I did that, thinking that would protect me, but actually looking back in hindsight, it wouldn't have protected me if the job wanted to suspend me post-retirement, because technically I'm still on the books. So they could have came back and suspended me, took my retired ID card, took my good guy letter, and did all that and said, nope, you're not retired in good standing in the New York City Police Department. Another way you could do that is waive all of your time and say, I'm retiring immediately. And I want my good guy letter and I want my resignation. So what they're going to do is they're going to run the background checks on you. They're going to do all of these things. And if you have any pending allegations against you, which Jeffrey Maddrey should have, and how he didn't is beyond me, the job would say you can't retire. And so whoever was in charge of that investigation, now say you're going for retirement and I submit for retirement, the job does all these background checks on me. right? They're going to send it to IAB. They send it everywhere. Now, say I get flagged at IAB. Oh, John has an active investigation because he's doing on-duty booty. And he's, and he's doing all these other things. And, he's giving cars to people so that they go down and extort businesses and all this other stuff, right? So they're like, no, John actually has all these investigations. So what the pension section does, or the ID card section will do, and the pension section will do, is they'll call internal affairs and they'll say, what's going on? Is he okay to retire? And so they'll call the group CO, the internal affairs group CO, and he'll look at the allegation, and he'll either give the yay or nay. If he or she says no, that person cannot retire because they have a pending investigation. Technically, they cannot stop you from retiring, but what they could do is suspend you and modify you for a 30-day period. And what that does is basically eliminate the possibility for you to get a good guy letter, your pistol permit, and your retired ID card. If you're going to disregard that order and say, well, I'm retiring at the end of this 30-day period anyway, I'm out of here. They can't technically stop you because, and I agree with that, because you did 20 years of service, right? You should be allowed. What I did, what you're getting me for now has nothing to do with my past 20 years. But the fact that didn't flag the minute Jeffrey Maddrey put in for retirement is insane, because it flags on people that literally have the stupidest thing. They have cases that were open for 4 years that IB dragged their feet on that was nothing. Guy was full duty the entire time, and now they're saying, oh no, you can't retire and you have to wait for us to close it out or we're going to modify you and take your guns and you're not going to get your good guy letter. And that happens all the time. It happens every month. It happens every week. And so that's the retirement process in the NYPD. So technically, although Jeffrey Maddrey submitted for his retirement, his effective date wasn't for a while down the road. And the job now suspended him without pay. They'll keep him suspended without pay for 30 days. And unless he decides to come back, or they can't make a criminal case or a case to fire Jeffrey Maddrey and terminate him. Same goes for apps. If they can't make a case to terminate within the 30 days, Maddrey is officially retired from the NYPD Police Department. He will not have a retired ID card. He will not have his HR 218, his pistol permit, or a good guy letter, which is saying that he retired in good standing with the NYPD. Another point in the retirement system. If in that 30 days they were able to terminate you, you're under 20 years, you're terminated, you're screwed. So you lost everything. It's gone. You're terminated. You're not getting a pension. You're not getting health benefits. Your past 20 years, unless you get convicted of a felony, job can't do absolutely anything to you. So if you retire, you're retired. Your pension and your health care is in place. You're not going to have the ID card. You're not going to have the good guy letter. You're not going to have the HR 218. Not the end of the world.
Well, that's actually shows a substantial difference right now between Tier 2 and Tier 3. So that is one benefit that the Tier 3 personnel do have at this point, because Tier 3 personnel can say, I'm retiring, and they retire the next day. Unlike Tier 2, where it's actually a 30-day period. No matter what, when you're under Tier 2, which Maddrey was under Tier 2, when you put your papers in, even if you had 5 years on the books, there's still a 30-day period of notice to the pension section. And during those 30 days, even if you waive your time, an assessment or something can be done upon you, which to me is more reflective that internal affairs has to be outsourced at this point. I see some great comments here. People saying maybe it could be made up of retired guys, which I think is a great idea. I think our union should be retired service members. And I think that's a good look also. Potentially internal affairs could be retired members, right? Because we do want a police perspective, but we want someone that does not have some type of connection to the police department where there is leverage and also potential for benefit. So I do think that's a great option to look into retired members to fill those seats in internal affairs, definitely with the unions. And I think that was a great assessment, John, about retirement. I myself could actually just speak on my experience. So, I was facing 8 sets of administrative charges in a 6-week period from CCRB. My cases were already 4 and almost 5 years old, and the statute of limitations was exceeded. The COVID extension was used to ramp these cases against me. So I had asked to take all these cases to trial, and I was told I would have to wait 2 to 3 more years because of the manpower. So I knew at that point it was time for me to go. I was offered intel in the squad, but I didn't want to do it. I couldn't let my men and women go out there while I was hiding. I couldn't do it. So I did not listen. I actually went against the advice of the union. If I went against the advice of the union, I probably would have been terminated. So I decided I put my papers in with charges pending. So I knew I wasn't getting a good guy letter. I wasn't going to get my terminal leave, but I would still get my pension and variable supplement. So during those 30 days, actually about 2 weeks into it, that's when the CCRB contacted the union, and I guess they wanted their blood, and they said they were willing to consolidate all the cases and take a penalty. So that's where I lost 64 days. And initially they asked for 90 days. I was like, hell no, I'll just keep going with the charges pending. So finally they settled them. I got my good guy letter, and I lost 64 days. But it was during that 30-day period. So I think that's a great explanation on it, and which is completely different from now. If you're tier 3, is going to retire the following day. You can vest the next day. You can retire the next day. So I'm actually surprised that they actually allowed tier 3 to go through. I mean, there's a lot of things about tier 3 that just completely suck. But when it comes to that, it's actually pretty good for the members. But it just shows that internal affairs can't be trusted. I mean, during this 30-day period, if it wasn't for this FBI, I think he would be walking into bliss. He already went to the board. Eventually, he would get his 3/4, and it would just be another nepotism upper echelon tier member that doesn't apply to the standard. I mean, think about it. If this was anyone else, they would have been dragged through the mud and suspended immediately, but not Jeffrey Maddrey. So everything we say in this podcast, when it comes to a 3-tiered system, is on the money.
Yeah, I mean, it's zero standard, and so Jeffrey Maddrey only gets suspended, in my opinion, because the feds raid his home. I mean, do you agree with that statement? Like, if the feds don't raid Jeffrey Maddrey's home, do you think he gets suspended?
Oh, that's what I was just saying. Absolutely not. If it wasn't for this raid, Jeffrey Maddrey would be riding off into the sunset. He would be going to the same island that you saw Tim Robbins go to in Shawshank Redemption. He would be riding off into the sunset. He would be fine, right? I mean, that was the plan. That was the whole plan of the press conference, right? Is to blame the commanding officer, which they blamed on this guy, Paul Saraceno, the executive officer. Find someone to blame, right? So Jeffrey Maddrey's not culpable. They did that. They accomplished that mission. And then somehow navigate and smear Lieutenant Epps, right? Call her a swinger, smear her, make it like Jeffrey Maddrey is so attractive, she had to have him. And he's not culpable in that either, and he would have went off into the sunset. But this FBI raid is what intercepted and got him suspended. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. Other thing, I put out a tweet the other day about Tanya Kinsella, because her number one actually just put in for retirement, lieutenant in her office, and that was like her go-to girl who was always with her. So that's always questionable, right? But she had over 20, so maybe she wanted to leave. But also, the executive commanding officer in her command was transferred to personnel. And so that, to me, appears like Tanya Kinsella is on the outs. And then I sit there and I say, well, is Tanya Kinsella on the outs with Jessica Tish? Or is she ultimately on the outs with Eric Adams? And I'm going to say that if anyone's getting moved, it's because you're ultimately on the outs with Eric Adams. And it has nothing to do, because I personally believe anything from this point on, I'm looking at Tish as a puppet, because I don't see any real action from her. I see things being done that have to be done. We're replacing all of Group 1, but you're putting the guy in charge that's directly involved in all of these, and the guy that you just suspended after the FBI raided his home, that you didn't suspend immediately, that's this dude's mentor, where he said it over and over again. If you need the tapes, I could play them for you, where it said Jeffrey Maddrey is my friend and my mentor. Jeffrey Maddrey, my friend, my mentor. Jeffrey Maddrey, my mentor. Like, I mean, does anyone believe that? Like that, this like no one knew what was going on. Does anyone believe that? Like it's insane. So like, what do you think? Do you think we're going to see some more executive movement in 25? Do you think this is the end of it? Do you think John Chell comes in place and that's it? We put John in. He's cleaning up everything. It's good now. Everything's good.
No, I think 2025 is going to be ramped up. I think we're going to be blowing up this podcast along with our friends and listeners, because I think this is going to be far worse. It's going to be worse than we've ever seen. All the corruption that we've seen is going to seem like child's play compared to what's going to happen when John Chell is in charge of the police department. Just think, if he received support before as a chief of patrol for the pissing matches he had with journalists on social media, now he's arguably the most powerful man in the NYPD. Because Jessica Tish doesn't know the operations that goes on as the knowledge, the vast amount of knowledge that John Chell has. He's been with the police department for about 30 some odd years. So, and with his boots on the ground, he's been a police officer. He's went through the ranks, so he knows the inner linings of the police department. He also has the connections. He's got the nepotism with Mayor Eric Adams going back to when Adams was Brooklyn Borough president and John Chell was running was running the borough in Brooklyn. So there's nepotism right there. He had received the support of Eric Adams for controlling this narrative. I mean, Eric said it numerous times. He recently said it. He said it to Corey Pegues. They want to hold Mayor Eric Adams accountable. Who's holding the media accountable? So he's got John Chell to do it. I think this is going to be far worse. It's going to be nothing like we've seen before.
No, I agree. Vaughn Cruz says, for transparency, fairness, and auditing purposes, discretionary promotions applications should be in online forms, signed off online by supervisors, and move up electronically so they won't get lost. I think the same goes for transfers too, because I had an issue getting out of IAB. It took me about 8 months right upon my 2 years to get out. And I had made it well known. I let every executive know that I wanted to leave prior to even my 2 years coming up. Even when they told me, oh, we're putting you in for the money, I was like, give it to someone else, because I really, I don't want to step, and I think, and that one got lost. It kept getting lost. My transfer just kept getting lost, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. Like, I have a home. I want to go work. I want to make money. I wasn't making money there, and that's it. My friend's having a problem somewhere, and I could help him do what he needs to be done. So I want to go there. Like, it shouldn't be that hard. And the other thing. So I agree with you. Everything should be electronic so that we could go back in time. It should be transparent, not only for the members, but for everybody, for the public. I mean, this is a taxpayer-funded good, and everything that happens should be transparent. But one of the things I have a problem with the transfers is, and I always did, was the commanding officer's recommendation. I always thought that was nonsense. I always thought it was nonsense that the commanding officer or the borough commander could hold me back, or the borough or bureau commander could hold me back. If you're doing a good job, if you're rated, whatever, you should be able to put in for a transfer and be transferred if that bureau needs you, depending on the needs of the department. And that decision should ultimately be made through personnel and nobody else, due to head count and numbers and things of that, things like that. And I don't think that portals like transfer portal, like a job should even come up, other than if personnel approved it. So if that job's there should be a slot for that was already approved. And then that's it. It ultimately comes down to who picks you. And that's it. If you go for that interview and that chief says, yeah, I want John, I want Eric, you should be able to get transferred. You shouldn't have to jump through hoops. Oh, I got my CO to sign it, but he just left 3 days ago, and now they need an updated CO's rec with a new CO that you don't even know. And he's like, you didn't even work for me. And I'm like, bro, I don't even know you, dude. Like, what are you talking about? You didn't work for you. Why are you doing this to me? Like, that stuff needs to be more transparent as well. But it's not, because there were obviously shady things happening with transfers and promotions, and that's why it's not transparent. Because, again, I've said it over and over again. I'm going to say it again here. This administration is the least transparent administration ever. And that is saying something, not only because it's the height of the information age, but because this is New York City and the NYPD have been systemically corrupt for almost the entirety of their history, with the exception of the last 30 years.
Some of these comments are great. They're great. And these are friends that listen to the podcast. Some of them are agreeing with me and disagreeing with me, and same thing with you, John. And that's the beauty of this podcast. I wouldn't say to someone, oh, you're wrong. Oh, I'm right. I think it's great. We should have these conversations. For instance, there's a conversation going on with Ron Layson, Logic's Finest, and Patrick Donahue. And so Patrick Donahue and Ron Layson disagree that all the executives are complicit in this corruption scandal with the NYPD. And I know I've been pretty confident in my stance, and I have not wavered from it. And I'll continue to that stance that every executive at this point is compromised. And there are casualties in this. To what level they're compromised? Yes, there's different degree. And for some of them, the level of that I'm saying that they compromised is just seeing what's going on and not saying anything. And some people are saying here, and I get it. I understand your position, Ron Layson and Patrick Donahue, and I think you guys are great friends and listen on the podcast, and I appreciate it. But from my point of view, it's so egregious right now. It's so atrocious. This is the biggest corruption scandal to hit the NYPD. This is not your every run-of-the-mill, hey, that something doesn't look right. There's something going on. This is not just something that's isolated to just to the sex scandal. There is so many different aspects going on. There's just so much going on. And no one's banding together and saying enough is enough. And at some point, even if they're unhappy with it, and I know Patrick Donahue, you put a comment, there's still some good people there. And believe me, I know there are some good people there. There are a few chiefs that I know personally that I actually like. And I still say that because it's not personal. I think that everyone has to go. We just need to clean house. And I'm sorry. And I know Ron Layson says if he was still there, he would be replaced. And unfortunately, it's not personal, but yes, it's the reality, because at some point, someone has to stand up, and we need new blood. We need a complete different new system, because right now, this overtime plan that has now been pressed down to the rank and file is going to be monitored by every chief on the job. And no one's saying, wait a minute, my men and women are not responsible for this. We don't agree with this. They have to band together at some point. And that's not what's happening here. I mean, at some point, we need them to, I don't know what's going on. It looks like a crazy amount of light here. But at some point, they have to band together. You see that? I don't know what that is.
That's weird, bro.
Yeah, I don't know.
Coming after you, bro.
But at some point, I do think that this is just, it's so atrocious on different levels. At some point, the Chiefs have to band together and say, okay, wait a minute. We can't put this pressure on men and women. It's going to destroy morale, destroy camaraderie. These are mistakes at the upper echelon. And it's not just mistakes. This is intentional and deliberate. So I get it. I know they have to walk a fine line. They don't want to have, just have political and career suicide. But at some point, when is the time that we stand up? The unions aren't doing it. Someone has to do it. And they have the keys and the power to do it, right? And I say that because there is a skill to managing people below you, but there's also a skill to managing people above you. And these chiefs have the power to say, hey, at these meetings, what is going on here? We're putting all this pressure on men and women, and yet our men and women are not responsible for this. I have a problem with that. And we're not seeing that. We're not seeing that. So I get it. I understand Ron Layson's point of view. And, I really appreciate it when we agree, disagree. And Patrick Donahue, I appreciate your assessment. There are good people there. I know that. I'm not saying that they're all bad. I don't want anyone to think, they're all pieces of garbage. That's not why they need to go, because the infection goes down throughout the entire ranks of the Chiefs. And I know Ron Layson and I have spoken. We talk about some of the Chiefs being compartmentalized, and I understand that. But this is just so astronomical, and it's out there. We need them to band together and say something, because if not, what is next? What if Jeffrey Maddrey had said, you know what? I want every lieutenant in every precinct now. I want you to chop off their heads. Are we going to do it? At what point do we stand up? Is there a threshold? Is there a boundary? Is at some point do we draw the line? And that's my point. I get there are nice people, but are they good people? So yes, they're good people, but they're not willing to stand up at this point. It's so egregious. Someone has to stand up to fight for these men and women, the rank and file. It's not the unions. We're doing it, but someone has to stand up for them, and it has to come from within, because this can of worms opens from the inside.
100%.
Your mic was off.
Shit, I must have hit my mic. Sorry.
It's all right. I got light on me. Your mic's not going.
What the hell's going on here? I said, do you think that Maddrey's going to get collared?
What's that?
Do you hear me or no?
No, I hear you. Now I hear you.
I said, do you think that Maddrey's going to get collared?
Yes, I do. I do. Now with this FBI probe, that gives me a different perspective. If we didn't have that before, I would say no. But I do. And again, I do believe in due process. I believe he's innocent until proven guilty. Am I saying he raped her? I haven't said that at all. I don't. I think this is a very tough case to prove or disprove. It's a horrible situation to be in. I do think eventually she'll be arrested, but it does appear that she has some daunting evidence. I mean, some of the key details that she has provided. Do I think this is actually I don't know. But I do think he's going to get collared. I do. Is he going to get collared for this rape, or is it something else? Not sure. But to me, I think he's going to get wrapped up into this corruption probe. I do.
Yeah, so this is coming out from Freedom News TV, Olia Scudacast. This is Jeffrey Maddrey's home. This is the feds at his home conducting the search warrant. You see evidence being taken by way of photographs by an agent. So this is coming out right now. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I'm starting to think that there is. At first, I thought this was just an administrative investigation. And that was going to be, like I said, reverse engineered with the outcomes already determined, that they're just going to use Paul Sassano as the fall guy. And that's what it appered to be. They would hammer him administratively for what Maddrey was doing. But now I'm starting to think this is a criminal investigation. I'm thinking the feds are looking into this because of the overtime codes that were used. If that's the case, Jeff Maddrey has a big problem, and a lot of other people have big problems. Not just the top tier, the people who actually perform the overtime as well. They're going to have big problems, and the politics of Eric Adams and the NYPD aren't really going to save anybody at that point. So those reverse engineers investigations are only going to further implicate members of IEB that they're complicit and corrupt themselves, and they don't fight corruption in the NYPD. They just pull down the hammer of whoever that politician is that's in charge, or the administration that's in charge. So I think you're going to see some more scandals coming out of this. I agree with you that a lot of people need to go. I don't agree with you that everybody needs to go. I just won't agree with it. Like Ron makes a great point. I'm the one, let's say he's the 110 CO. What the hell does he know about what the hell's going on in 1PP? He knows that these guys are dirty. You might know it. You might think it. But what do you actually know and think? We know more about what's going on in the inner workings of the job than they do. I mean, literally, I have people in the NYPD that text me, "What are you hearing? What are you hearing?" I'm like, "Why are you texting me what I'm hearing? You're on the job, you loser. Like, what do you answer? Like, shouldn't it be the other way around?" And they're like, "You guys know more than we do." And it's true. It really is true. Like, like they don't know. They're focused on their job. They're going to Comstat. They're reading the shit in the paper. They're like, "Oh, man, you see this?" You know what I mean? They're watching the podcast right now. And they're learning things that they didn't know right now. Like, "Oh, look, Maddrey's house is being raided." So I'm not going to say everyone on the job needs to go, but I'm 100% saying that top tier of the job needs to go. And a lot of their staff. And a lot of their staff that were close tied. I mean, when you look at that, you see that there was a big problem. A lot of people on here talking about the discretionary promotions. We got a lot of tips recently about the discretionary promotions. And the part that discretionary promotions are like promotion to detective, or detective second grade, detective first grade, or sergeant detective squad, or lieutenant. special assignment or lieutenant detective commander, or promotions from captain to deputy inspector and things like that. But the promotions in particular that members of the NYPD are concerned with are the promotions from February 2023 to December 2024, especially around the Halloween 2023 discretionary promotions. Those are the ones that the members seem most concerned with, where they're saying that there's pay to play. That's the rumors that's coming out. We've gotten it a couple of times now. So anybody that's looking at the promotions, I think that's the ones you want to hone in on.
How many chiefs are really on the job? You have the chief of department, Maddrey. He's obviously compromised. John Chell, the chief that was in the office, Saraceno. This other chief. What's that?
Compromise.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We can start going through the lines. I think that
better off compromised.
I think Chief Kenny's compromised. I mean, there's a lot of chiefs that are compromised, and some of them are nice people. I think Savino's compromised. I mean, we can go down the. What's that?
Compromise.
We can go down the line. I mean, if you really want to like cross hairs, there'd be very few people to not be compromised. This is
how about the XO of Staten Island or the CO of Staten Island? I don't think that they're compromised. I just don't.
Where do they go for meetings? At One Police Plaza.
But they're not in that.
They're being pressed on overtime. I know what you're saying. They're being pressed on overtime. Listen, there's going to be some casualties of war. By the way, shout out to Patrick Donahue. I love this guy. Eric, if you don't agree with Ron and myself, I will call Taru and have your Starlink sabotaged and your RV monitored by Kaz's drones. You know what? I'm with you.
It's already happening. Look at the light on them. It's shining a light on them.
Dude, I don't know what this light is. But I tell you right now, there's no way that this probe right here is just this actual sex scandal. And that's why I said if he's going to get collared, it's probably not going to be for an alleged rape. It's probably going to be something to do with the overtime and something an excessive amount of funds for the FBI to actually get involved. And I'm not saying there's no basis to her case. I don't know. Like I said, I think it's really tough to prove or disprove those kind of cases. It's a horrible situation to be in as a complainant and also as a potential perpetrator, especially if you're innocent. Those cases are really tough to prove and disprove. But we know there's definitely an appearance of impropriety. One thing we know is factual. I don't care what anybody says. It's factual that this was an excessive, egregious amount of overtime, and it was impossible for Epps to actually perform this amount of overtime at work. The amount of hours, it's impossible. She could have never taken a day off, never a week off of vacation, and never went home. So those are factual. And I do think that there is going to be more raids coming out. Maybe John Chell will be raided. I don't know. But I don't think this is the end of it. I think this is just the beginning. 2025, I think they're going to come in even stronger.
I personally think this month's going to be fireworks. I think there's going to be a lot of things that rear their head. I don't even think it's just 25. I think this month is going to be off the hook. It's already off the hook with crime. Here's another high-ranking member of the NYPD had their home raided. Just another corruption allegation that Southern District of New York is handling. I mean, how much do we have to see to realize that Eric Adams is the most corrupt mayor in New York City history? We can cross hairs on that. Bill de Blasio is a worse mayor. He's the more hated mayor. But I'm not, for 1 second, it is Eric Adams got the title. Oh, he also won the title of the Finest Unfiltered Man of the Year. Congratulations, Eric. We appreciate you for the content. We appreciate you for the laughs. So Eric Adams is the Finest Unfiltered Man of the Year, not for anything good. He's not for anything good at all, but for the fact that he was able to become the first indicted mayor in New York City and continue to hold his post and continue to have the Republican Party and the Democrat Party stand behind him and make it like everyone else is the problem that he appointed except for him. So I think that was an achievement that hasn't been done for. The first indicted mayor did not step down. Only person that ever came close to indictment as the mayor of the city of New York was Jimmy Walker, and he resigned his post and fled the country. Eric Adams did not resign his post. He threw everyone around him under the bus, and he's continuing to reign.
I'm curious. Do you think Tish will last if Eric Adams is going to make it to the point of re-election or running for re-election? Or do you think that she has a short stint? What would you say right now? How long do you think she'll last, if anything?
I think that I think she is going to last out the Eric Adams administration. However long that is. Like I said, I do think she's setting herself up for a political run. She was looking amazing up until the last few days. So I think she isn't going anywhere. If Eric Adams is rerunning, Jessica Tish is the police commissioner. But I don't know. Again, I just can't see how this, and again, maybe I just don't see the superpowers that this man actually has. But I just don't see how he lasts out. I don't see how he finishes his term. I don't see how he runs for re-election, even though he's telling everyone, including what we saw on Corey Pegues's live, that he's going to make re-election, that he's going to run for re-election. I don't see it. I mean, it's just I just don't see how. But again, who knows? New York's a crazy place, so he's proven me wrong time and time again. So maybe he just proves me wrong again. But I think that if he stays as mayor, if he runs, if he wins re-election, she's the police commissioner.
Well, here's the reality. So, and I'm a firm believer in this in life. It's not always the right way to be, but it's the truth. In the beginning, she was looking amazing, right? But this actual suspension right here of Maddrey, I think already destroyed her potential for a legacy, because she didn't actually put her foot on it. This was supposed to be swift and immediate. She was supposed to suspend him immediately. She did not take that action. And now Jeffrey Maddrey was suspended after an FBI raid. To me, this just destroyed her legacy. Because, and what I say by that is it does, this is the way life is. You could do 100 things right in life, and people are always going to remember what you did wrong. You do 100 things great, but you made a mistake. And unfortunately, that's what people remember. And let's think about it, John. When you were working out in the police department, your commanding officer is not calling you in every day to say, hey, John, you did a great job, great job, great job. He's calling you in when you did something wrong. You can do everything right, but when you do something wrong, that's when they're going to call you in. Now, I do believe that people make mistakes, but this, I mean, you are now the police commissioner. It doesn't matter if you're a police commissioner 1 year or 2 days. She's the commissioner. She was supposed to put her foot down and suspend him immediately, and she failed. This, I think, destroyed her legacy already. And I know we always make bets and we talk about it. I say she doesn't last. I'm going to say it right now today. She does not last. You will see another commissioner. If Eric Adams does not get removed, she will not be the last commissioner.
We'll see. I don't know. We'll see. So we got 2,080 people on here. Thanks for joining us this morning. We're talking about the continued corruption in Eric Adams' administration, particularly in the NYPD. And the hits just keep coming. 2025 picking up right where we left off in 2024. Crimes through the roof. He's continuing to say crimes down. Downplayed a mass shooting last night with a 3-minute press conference, continuing to hide from the press. Before we go into John Chell, Phil Rivera, and Ed Thompson being named in Times Square, I just want to play this press conference. I thought this was hysterical. I thought it was absolutely hysterical. So watch this. Watch this press conference. This is Eric Adams. This is just exposing the narcissist that he is. You ready for this one? Here we go.
Oh, who's their popular reporter? Because outside of this, they may not know who you are. I made your careers. You know that, right? Some of you are going and write books, and just do your whole assessment. You have to be the Katie. You must be the happiest person going. Like, who knew who you were before I became the mayor? Right. All of you, that all of you, you're going to sit back. Y'all didn't have this much fun with the former mayor, did you?
So he tells Katie Honan, nobody knew who you are before me. Totally false. Everybody know who Katie Honan was, especially in the police department. So Katie Honan's been a great on the ground reporter. Sometimes we disagree with her, sometimes we agree with her, but I not a reporter I want to go up against. If you got a problem, I don't want Katie coming at me asking me questions because she has some hard hitting questions. But I just think it's so fun. Like, he is so funny, dude. He's right. He's 100% right on the end of it. They did not have this much fun with the former administration. I hadn't had this much fun with the former administration. So he's right about that.
I gotta admit, Saturday Night Live could never do a skit as good as Eric Adams. Eric Adams should just do his own skits. He's hilarious. So when we say 4 more years, for me, I'll take 4 more years of Eric Adams. He's hysterical, man. Who else would say something like that? Drone Ranger says that chuckle. That's the same chuckle as you wake up every morning and thank God Eric Adams is your mayor. I mean, he's hysterical. Who said it best? Katie Honan? He's not a narcissist. Just ask him. I'll tell you. He is hilarious. When he talks about people writing books, he's talking about us.
He's talking about crumbs. He's talking about the crumbs, the saga.
You know what?
South Jamaica to City Hall.
That's what I said yesterday. We were talking about this offline. And I said, I think that Eric Adams doesn't care if it's negative attention or positive attention. As long as you're talking about him, he loves it. He's the center. They say be the hero in your own movie. He's the hero in his own movie. He is like, I'm the star, So that's him.
He's wild, dude. But that was a hysterical press conference. So, question for you: why do you think Chell was appointed in the middle of Times Square without any press around, in the height of insanity, drunk people everywhere, loudness everywhere? They just did it with the NYPD cameras there, and Rivera and Thompson. Was it symbolism? Or was it a perception fight? Was it look, this is your city and now you're going to be in charge of it? Or was it a perception campaign being played?
Everything with this administration is perception campaign. There's no doubt about it. Also, what does it do? It actually alleviates from having to answer questions. You don't have to answer questions. It's New Year's Eve. It's cold out. It's loud. It's busy. You don't have the press there. He knows he's going to get a lot of questions for John Chell being appointed chief of department. There was extreme amount of opposition for him being promoted to chief of patrol. You're only going to get further opposition to him being chief of department. So, absolutely. And by the way, I just want to say, shout out to Patrick Donahue. I know he says he knows Kenny, and Kenny's not compromised. And listen, I really appreciate that you're advocating for these guys. And I'm not saying that they're bad guys. Some of them are nice guys. But I just think that this is stemmed through. There's so many casualties in this. And there are a lot of people, and I know that your friends, they're nice people, but they saw some things that they shouldn't see, and they're not saying anything because they're scared of their careers. And I get it, right? If they say certain things, it could be career suicide. But sometimes someone has to be willing to jump on the grenade, and figuratively speaking, and I know I always make these comparisons, but when I was in the Marine Corps, they take you through a leadership course. And one of the courses they take you through, and is to honor these different Marines that had jumped on grenades. And you walk through it, and they give you the history of it. And it's unfortunate, but sometimes you have to jump on the grenade to save other lives. And that's not what I'm seeing here. I think that everyone is looking out for themselves, and they're all worried about themselves. And at some point, who is going to advocate for others?
No, I agree. Pat Donahue says, instead of a Super Bowl, maybe the podcast can start an indicted arrested a pool. The 10% donation to the pool organizer, Vig, can be donated to the legal fund of Tabitha, John, Eric, and Sal. Marlon too. Yeah, absolutely. That's hysterical. A lot of people have been asking us for an updated version of the indicted bingo. So we've been busy with a lot of stuff. Obviously, it's been the holidays. We're going to start to normalize out as the days go on. Might be down tomorrow. Maybe up. I got to see what time headed back to Florida. But we'll definitely be up if anything crazy breaks. On top of that, I'll be back in New York City end of the month. They got some stuff to do here. And I mean, yeah, it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be a crazy month, dude. I honestly do. I think it's gonna be a crazy, crazy month. Anything you want to talk about before we get out of here? We've been on here about 2 hours and 30 minutes. Got about 2,100 people on here. Anything you want to go on before we get off?
No, I think we touch all bases. I just think it's great to signify that that's the whole purpose of this podcast, is that we can have real conversations. We're not just having conversations on the surface. And because we're all, most of us here are in retirement or civilians, and we have active members that are here, and you have a pseudonym name, that we're able to be in a space that we could actually talk and have a real conversation and not worried about the effects of the police department, the internal pressure. So here we can be honest with each other. We can agree. We could disagree. And I think that's a healthy space. And I'm okay with people disagreeing with me. I don't believe in trying to win an argument. And you guys make up some great points. And I definitely, I listen to them. And I have the way that I feel and you have the way that you feel. But I don't think any of them are wrong. I think ultimately we want what's going to be the best version for the police department. So somehow we can all compromise and come up with what we think would be the best, yield the best results for the police department. So with that being said, I do want to say again, Happy New Year to everyone. It's 2025. Like, share, and please subscribe to the podcast. Watch on YouTube. Watch us live on X. Like I said, we're going to play it by ear. Most likely, we might be up tomorrow. We might not, no big deal, but we'll be back. And as John said, if something is breaking news, we'll be on it and we'll keep you posted. So thank you so much for everybody. Happy New Year. Thank you for all the coffee and donuts. And Had says anti-crime has to come back. You're absolutely right. So Ron Layson, Patrick Donahue, Logic's Finest, all these guys making great comments. Drone Ranger and Stephen S. Lampwick, thank you so much. And even you, JuJu, I appreciate it. You hung in with us. I hope you hang in all 2025. I guess we'll see how things go. So thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. Guys, unfortunately, we don't have a Charlie on the Parkway video to close with. We're gonna if any of you guys get any Charlie on the Parkway videos, please send them to us. I haven't had time to look. So so we appreciate it. We'll be back at you. Stay tuned, watch the podcast, watch all social media for when the next one's gonna come out tomorrow. If anything breaks, you know where to go. We'll bring it to you. New York's Finest Retired and Unfiltered podcast. We'll be back at you.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 Blue. That's 888 901 Blue.